The motel room that appeared only after midnight. I want to begin with what I know about the motel itself. Because the motel is real, it appears on maps, it has a star rating on 3 different travel websites, and I have a receipt from it in a filing cabinet in my home office that I take out sometimes and look at. Just to remind myself that at least part of what happened can be verified. The motel is called the Pineview Rest on US 41 in northern Wisconsin, and it has 22 rooms arranged in 2 single-story wings around a gravel parking lot. I have confirmed 22 rooms with the owner, a tired-looking man named Bert who has run the place for 15 years. 22 rooms, not 23. My name is Christopher Allen. I am a travel writer, or I was. I have since moved into other work, for reasons that will become clear. I was driving the northern Wisconsin circuit for a regional magazine, collecting material on small-town character and road stop culture. The kind of assignment that sounds romantic and involves a great deal of time in places like the Pineview Rest. I arrived at approximately 9 p.m. on a Thursday in late October. Bert gave me room 14, which was clean and smelled of industrial lavender and had a window that faced the parking lot. I had dinner at a diner 3 miles south and returned to the motel at around 11:30. The lot was quiet. A few other cars, 3, I noted, belonging to the other occupied rooms. I could not sleep. This is common for me in unfamiliar places. I am a light sleeper and new sounds intrude. I lay in the dark and listened to the particular acoustic profile of the motel. The ice machine at the end of the corridor, a truck passing on US 41 every few minutes, the distant television in one of the neighboring rooms. At some point past midnight, I had not checked the clock, but I estimate between 12:30 and 1 a.m., I became aware of light under my door. Not the hallway light, which I had noted was a low night safety fixture. This was brighter, warmer, and it pulsed very slightly, the way light pulses when it comes from a source that is not entirely stable. I got up. I looked through the peephole. The corridor was normal, the same low safety lighting I had walked through earlier. But from further down the corridor, from a direction I associated with the end of the wing, there was additional light, warm, coming from what appeared to be an open door. I opened my door and looked down the hallway. At the far end of the wing, past room 16, which was where I believed the corridor ended. I had walked this corridor to the ice machine and noted room 16 as the last door. There was another door. Open. Light coming from inside. I walked toward it. The door was between where room 16's exterior should end and the exterior wall of the wing. The geometry of the building, as I had understood it from the outside, did not accommodate another room at this location. But the door was there, and it was open, and the light from inside was warm and yellow and inviting in the way that light is when it comes from a room with good lamps and a low ceiling. I looked in. It was a motel room, a nicer one than mine, not dramatically so, but with the particular quality of a room that has been recently furnished rather than maintained. A made bed with a deep green coverlet, a desk with a lamp, a wingback chair in the corner that no standard motel room includes, a window, which should not have been possible given the building's exterior geometry, showing what appeared to be the parking lot, but with a different arrangement of cars, different cars I had not seen in the lot. On the desk, a book, open and face down, a glass of water, a notepad with writing on it. I did not go in. I stood at the doorway for perhaps 2 minutes, looking at the room and the room's objects and the window that showed the wrong parking lot. Then I walked back to room 14 and sat on the edge of my bed and thought carefully. In the morning, I walked the corridor again. Rooms 12, 13, 14, mine 15, 16, and then the corridor wall. No door between 16 and the wall. I pressed my hand against the wall. Solid, cool, normal plaster over frame construction. I asked Bert at checkout if there had been any renovations recently. He said no. I asked if the wing had ever had more than 8 rooms. He looked at me curiously and said, "No, always 8 rooms, 16 total in both wings, plus the office unit. 22, I said, and he agreed, 22. 22 rooms, not 23. I wrote the piece for the magazine and did not include any of this. But I have thought about room 23, or whatever it should be called, every week since. I think about the green coverlet in the wingback chair and the window showing a different parking lot. I think about the notepad on the desk with writing on it that I was close enough to see but not close enough to read. I went back once, 6 months later. Different season, different car. I got room 14 again. Bert seemed to prefer putting single travelers in 14. I waited until past midnight and walked the corridor. The door was there. Open again. The same warm light. This time I read the notepad. It said, "You have been here before." I had not. I had never been to the Pineview Rest before the October visit. The notepad had 4 more lines below the first. I read all of them. I am not going to tell you what the other lines said, because some things are private and some things are warnings and some warnings are personal. What I will tell you is that I checked out the following morning without speaking to Bert, and I drove south for 4 hours before I stopped. And I have not driven US 41 since. The room exists only after midnight. I believe this with the certainty of direct experience. Sometime between midnight and the hours before dawn, a door appears at the end of the corridor in the east wing of the Pineview Rest. And behind it is a room with a green coverlet and a wingback chair and a window that looks out at a different night. I don't know whose room it is. I don't know who leaves the notepad and writes on it. I don't know how the window shows a different parking lot through a wall that has no window. I know the room knew I had been there before, even though I hadn't. And I know that the 4 lines below the first are mine, and have been for a long time, written down in a room that only exists when the rest of the world is asleep. Waiting for me to read them. I read them. I drove south for 4 hours. Some notes are not meant to be acted on immediately. Some warnings are long game things. They plant in you and grow in the dark, and eventually, when the time is right, they mean what they always meant, and you know what to do. I am still waiting to know what to do. The notepad is in my memory. Perfect, unfading, every word. When the time comes, I'll recognize it. The room has been waiting long enough. I think I have too. Story 2 of 20, every door in my house. Led somewhere different. The first thing I want to establish is that I am a structural engineer. I have a degree from a good university, 15 years of professional practice, and a working understanding of how buildings are built and how they behave. I know what is possible inside a constructed space and what is not. I know that a door, when opened, leads to whatever is physically on the other side of it. This is not complicated. This is geometry. My name is Patricia Holt. The house is on Elmira Street in a mid-sized Midwestern city that I am going to decline to name for reasons that have nothing to do with privacy and everything to do with not wanting anyone to visit the house on Elmira Street. It is a Victorian-era structure. 4 bedrooms, original woodwork. The kind of house that real estate listings describe as having character, which is the word realtors use for old and complicated. I had lived there for 3 years without incident. I know the house the way a structural engineer knows any building she inhabits, with professional attention to detail. an awareness of the load-bearing walls, the foundation, the places where the old construction shows its age, and the places where it has held up better than anything built today. I knew that house. In November of the year, I am not going to specify, the house began to disagree with my knowledge of it. It started with the basement door. The basement door is at the end of the kitchen hallway, a heavy wooden door with a brass knob opening onto the basement stairs. I have used this door hundreds of times. I know the particular creak it makes in the third step down, the way the temperature drops as you descend, the smell of old concrete and the dehumidifier running. On a Tuesday evening, I opened the basement door and found myself looking at the backyard. Not the top of the basement stairs, the backyard. My actual backyard. I could see the oak tree, the garden shed, the neighbor's fence. Viewed, apparently, from the level of the kitchen floor, as if the door opened onto a raised deck I had never built. I closed the door, stood in the kitchen for a moment, then opened it again. Basement stairs. The third step with its familiar creak when I tested it with one foot. I went back upstairs and had a glass of water and decided, as rigorously as I could, that I had experienced some kind of visual disturbance, fatigue, blood sugar, any of the things that briefly scramble the brain's processing. I noted it and moved on. The following Thursday, the bathroom door, which had always opened onto the bathroom, opened onto the upstairs hallway, from a different angle than my position in the hall, as if the door were positioned elsewhere in the hall, and I were looking through it at myself from a position I was not standing in. I saw myself, standing in the hallway, looking at the bathroom door, and through the bathroom door, I saw myself looking at the bathroom door. I closed the door quickly. The mirror self had looked startled at exactly the moment I had been startled. Perfect correspondence. But the angle was wrong, the geometry was wrong. It was not my reflection. Reflections don't show you from angles that require a different camera position. I began keeping a log, a structural engineer's log, precise, dated, timed, descriptive. Over the following 3 weeks, the front door, on 2 occasions, opened onto a room I had never seen before. A sitting room with old furniture and a fire that was burning low, the kind of fire that had been going for hours, the embers deep red. No one in the room on either occasion. The room smelled of cedar and something I couldn't identify. The bedroom closet opened onto a dark space, not my closet with its ordered rows of clothes, but a dark and apparently extensive space, like a room that had never been furnished and never been lit, that went back further than any closet could go. I did not go in. I could hear something in the dark, far back, that I am going to describe simply as breathing, not frightening breathing, not threatening breathing, just the ordinary sound of something that breathes existing in the dark of my closet. The back door, once, opened onto what appeared to be the inside of my house. From outside, looking in, I was standing at my own back door, looking through it at my own kitchen from the outside perspective, while simultaneously standing in my kitchen. I called a colleague, a structural engineer named Robert, who specializes in historic buildings and has, in the course of his career, encountered a wide range of building anomalies. I described what was happening without, initially, the more extreme examples. He suggested foundation shifting, framing issues, the way old buildings settle and distort. I said, "The basement door opened onto the backyard." He was quiet. Then I told him the rest. He said, "Pat, I've heard of this." "What do you mean?" "Buildings," he said slowly, "especially old ones, especially ones that have been in continuous occupancy for a long time. There's a theory. Not mainstream, not peer-reviewed, you understand. but among people who work with very old construction. He paused. A building can develop a kind of memory, a spatial memory. If the same doors have been opened 1,000 times, 10,000 times, the space around them develops something, a habit. And sometimes the habit and the current physical reality stop being the same thing. A building's memory, I said. I told you it wasn't mainstream, he said. He came and walked the house with me the following weekend. He was thorough. He examined the foundation, the framing, the doors, and their frames. He found nothing structurally wrong. The building was sound. We opened the basement door together. Basement stairs, third step creak, normal. We opened the front door, front porch, normal. It doesn't happen when you're watching, I said. He nodded slowly. When you're watching, he said, you're bringing your current knowledge of the space. You know what's on the other side of the door, and you're right. He looked at the front door thoughtfully. When you're not watching, when you open the door without the full force of your certainty, the building's memory takes over. I've moved since. Different house, newer construction, nothing with history enough to have developed whatever a Victorian on Elmira Street develops over 130 years of continuous use. I don't open doors without looking at them first. I know this is not reasonable behavior for a person in a normal house. I do it anyway. I put my hand on the knob, and I look at the door, and I say, clearly, in my mind, I know what is on the other side of this door. Then I open it. So far, so good. The house on Elmira Street is occupied again, a young family from what I've heard. I hope for them what I hope for anyone who lives in a very old building with very deep habits. I hope the doors remember where they're supposed to go. And when they forget, I hope the family has the good sense to close the door gently and wait, and then open it again. And find the basement stairs, the third step, the creak. Find what was always there. Find the house they think they know. Story 3 of 20. I found a missing person, living in my attic. Let me be precise about the timeline, because precision matters, and because the timeline is one of the things that has kept me awake on more nights than I can count. I moved into the house on the 14th of September. I found the missing person on the 3rd of November. That is 50 days during which I was living below someone who was listed on a national database as having disappeared 7 months earlier, from a city 400 miles away, under circumstances that the police described as suspicious. My name is Grace Nakamura. I am a paralegal. I am precise by training and by temperament. I take notes, I keep records. When something in my life doesn't add up, I document the gap. The first sign was the sound. A house has its sounds, settling, pipes, wind through whatever gaps the weatherproofing hasn't sealed. I catalog the sounds of my new house in the methodical way I catalog most things. The radiator knock, the tree branch against the east window in wind, the particular groan of the third step on the main staircase. Normal. What was not normal was the sound from the ceiling of the master bedroom, which had an access panel to the attic in the corner. A low, periodic sound. Footsteps, I thought at first, and dismissed it because houses produce sounds that register to the human ear as footsteps, particularly at night when other sounds are quiet and the brain is pattern-seeking. But the sound had rhythm, the particular arrhythmic rhythm of a person moving with deliberate quiet. The specific pausing, testing, careful placement that you don't get from structural movement or pipes or branches. The sound of a person trying not to be heard. I noted it on October 8th. I noted it again on October 12th, October 15th, October 19th. By the end of October, I had 8 notes in my log. 8 separate instances of the specific sound of quiet human movement from my attic. I did not go up immediately. I recognize this as, in retrospect, not the response that would be recommended. But I live alone, and the attic access panel is in my bedroom ceiling, and opening a panel into a dark space above your head where something is making human sounds felt at 2 in the morning, like a worse option than noting it and addressing it in daylight. On the 2nd of November, I called the landlord. Described the sounds. He came and went into the attic with a flashlight and came down shaking his head. Nothing up there, he said. Old insulation and the HVAC ducts and a lot of accumulated dust. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has had difficult tenants before and is filing this situation. On the 3rd of November at 11 p.m., I heard the sound again. More clearly than before, sustained, not brief. And then a cough, a human cough, stifled but not entirely suppressed. One single cough, directly above my bed. I got up. I pulled the access panel open. I said, into the dark, "I know someone is there. I'm going to turn on a flashlight. Please don't be frightened." Then I turned on the flashlight. She was in the far corner of the attic, in the space between 2 duct runs, where someone small could fit if they folded themselves carefully. She was small, slight, maybe 110 pounds, dark-haired, young. She was looking at me with an expression that I can only describe as resigned. Not frightened. Resigned, as if she had been waiting for this moment since before she knew it was coming. I said, "I'm going to get you some water and some food. Are you hurt?" She said nothing. I said, "You've been up here for a while." She said, "Since August." August. She had been in my attic since August. The house had been empty in August, the previous tenant had left in July, and I had moved in September. She had been there through the empty house and into my occupancy. 50 days of my occupancy. She had heard me below her every day, and I had heard her on 8 documented occasions, and neither of us had said anything until she coughed. I brought her water and food. I sat on the floor of the bedroom below the open panel, and we talked, carefully, for a long time. I am a paralegal. I know how to ask questions. I know how to listen to answers that are partial and arrived at slowly. She told me she had left her city in February, that she had not been taken, had not been abducted, she had left. That the circumstances she had left were circumstances she was not going to describe in detail, and I was not going to push her on, because I knew from her voice and her body, and the way she folded her arms when she mentioned home, that pushing was the wrong tool. She told me she had been moving from place to place, from empty space to empty space, that she had found the attic in August and had stayed because it felt in the way that places do when you're looking for them, like a place that would hold her. I asked her if she wanted me to call anyone. She said no. I believed her. I asked her if she needed help. She said she didn't know yet. I made up the couch. I told her it was warmer. She looked at the couch and then at the attic opening for a long time, and then she climbed down. She stayed for 3 weeks on the couch, and then in the spare room when I offered it. She ate dinners with me sometimes, and not others. She called a person, I don't know who, twice, both times speaking quietly and briefly. She was beginning to look less like someone folded into the smallest possible space. I did not report her. I want to be clear that I thought about this at length and with the rigor that my training makes difficult to avoid. She was an adult. She had left voluntarily. Whatever she was leaving from, she was not missing in the legal sense of the word. She was hiding, which is a right that adults have. difficult as that is for a database that lists you as suspicious circumstances missing. She left in late November. She left a note on the kitchen table that said, "Thank you," and gave me a number to call if I ever needed to reach her. I have not called it. I don't think she wants me to. What I think about sometimes, in the way that certain things embed themselves and don't let go, is August. The empty house, and a woman folding herself into the corner of an attic between two duct runs, finding a space that would hold her. Staying. My house held her. Whatever the house had that felt like the right place to be in a difficult time, it held her for months. I hope where she went is as good. I hope she found other places that hold her. I hope she is not in someone's attic right now because she is too careful and too quiet, and she deserves a room with a door she can open and close from the inside. A door she can open herself and find whatever she needs on the other side. Story 4 of 20. The elevator opened on a floor that doesn't exist. The building has 12 floors. This is documented in the building plans, in the fire escape maps posted in each corridor, and in the physical reality of a 12-story residential tower that I have lived in for 4 years. 12 floors, 12 lobby buttons in the elevator, 12 floors of apartments above the ground-level entrance lobby. Mathematics and architecture in complete agreement. The elevator opened on floor 13. My name is David Marsh. I live on the 9th floor of a building in a city I'll call the city, because the specific city doesn't matter, and I'm not interested in being visited by people who read this and want to try buttons. I am a software developer by profession, a man who thinks in systems, in logic, in the particular rigor of things that either work or don't. I don't have a framework for what I'm going to describe. I've spent 4 years building one and haven't finished. It happened on a Wednesday night in March, around 11 p.m. I was returning from a late dinner, carrying a bag, slightly preoccupied. I got in the elevator on the ground floor and pressed 9. Standard. The elevator went up. I have ridden this elevator perhaps 1,000 times. I know its particular acceleration, the floor count I can do by feel, the slight pause at each floor's arrival, the brief moment of equilibrium before the next movement. I know 9 floors. I know when I should stop. I didn't stop at 9. The elevator kept going. I looked at the panel. The 9 button was lit. The elevator passed what should have been 9 and continued upward. I pressed the door open button. Nothing. Pressed lobby. Nothing. Pressed several other buttons with increasing urgency. The elevator continued up. It stopped. The doors opened. The floor I was looking at was not any floor of my building. I mean this literally. The corridor was different in its proportions, in its lighting, in the material of its walls and floor. My building has carpeted corridors with cream-colored walls and fluorescent lighting under diffuser panels. This corridor had a dark hardwood floor, wallpaper, actual wallpaper, a dark pattern that I couldn't immediately identify, and sconce lighting, the warm, individual fixtures that you'd expect in a hotel of a certain era rather than a modern apartment building. I looked at the floor indicator. The panels showed the number 13. I looked at the corridor. It extended in both directions, curving slightly as it went, which my building's corridors do not do. They are straight, end to end, 4 apartments per side. This corridor curved, and in both directions I could see doors, 8 of them visible in the stretch I could see, which was longer than a floor of my building. The air was different. Not dramatically the same indoor temperature, roughly, slightly drier, but carrying a smell I hadn't encountered in the building before. Paper, old paper, and under it, something else I couldn't name. I did not step out. I stood at the edge of the open elevator with my grocery bag, and looked at the 13th floor of a 12-story building and thought about what I was seeing. The doors began to close. I held them open and stood there at the threshold and looked. One of the doors in the corridor opened. A man came out. Middle-aged, ordinary-looking, in a dress shirt and slacks. The kind of unremarkable person you would not notice twice. He stepped into the corridor and turned toward me. He saw me. He stopped. We looked at each other across approximately 20 feet of impossible corridor. "Wrong floor?" he said. Not as a question. Not unkindly. The way you'd say it to a neighbor who'd pressed the wrong button. "What floor is this?" I said. He looked at me steadily. 13, he said. "Yours is 9. "How do you know?" "Press 9, he said. "Go home." I pressed 9. The doors closed. The elevator descended. I felt it pass what should have been the 13th floor and counted down to 9. And the doors opened onto my correct corridor with its carpet and cream walls and fluorescent lighting, and I walked to my apartment and put my groceries away, and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I have told 3 people this story. All 3 have the same initial response. The building has a basement or a mezzanine that functions as an additional level, and the elevator numbering is inconsistent. I have checked this rigorously. The building has no basement residential level. The ground floor is the lobby. Floors 1 through 12 are residential. The elevator has 12 numbered buttons plus lobby. The building is 12 stories. This is not a numbering anomaly. I have pressed the 9 button perhaps 200 times since that night. The elevator has delivered me to floor 9 every single time without deviation. I have, twice, ridden the elevator without pressing any button, after 11 p.m., standing in the center of the elevator with my arms at my sides and my eyes on the panel. Both times, the elevator delivered me to 9. The 13th floor has not appeared again. I don't know what it would take to find it. I don't know if I want to find it. The man in the corridor knew my floor. He knew I belonged on 9. He sent me home with the tone of someone managing a small misunderstanding, not threatening, not alarmed, not curious, matter of fact. As if people arrived at 13 occasionally and were redirected. As if 13 was a place that existed, occupied, functional, with people going in and out of their apartments at 11 p.m. on Wednesday nights in March. As if 13 was just another floor. One the building knew about, and the fire maps didn't show, and the lobby panel didn't include, and nobody I've spoken to has ever been to or heard of. Just a floor. Going up past 12, where a man in a dress shirt tells you, "Wrong floor, yours is 9, and you press 9, and you go home. And you sit at your kitchen table and wonder if the man on 13 ever presses a button that doesn't exist for him. And where he goes. Story 5 of 20. Someone kept leaving food outside my bedroom door. I want to start with what I know about my apartment, because my apartment is mine and I know it well. I have lived there for 6 years. I know the sound of every pipe and every floorboard. I know which cabinet door swings back if you don't close it firmly, and which window sticks in August and where the draft comes from in January. I live alone. I have lived alone in that apartment for all 6 years. There is no other person with a key. The building has a coded lobby entry that I have not shared with anyone, and the deadbolt on my door, which I lock every night, requires a physical key that I possess and that has no duplicate in the world except the building manager's emergency copy. I tell you all of this so that you understand that when I say, I do not know who left the food, I mean, I genuinely do not know. And I have examined all the ordinary explanations, and they do not hold. My name is Rachel Kim. The food started appearing in February. The first morning, I opened my bedroom door and I nearly stepped on a plate. Scrambled eggs, slightly cooled, with toast and a small glass of orange juice, arranged neatly on the floor directly in front of my door. My first thought was that I had sleepwalked. I have no history of sleepwalking. I examined this possibility seriously, looked up sleepwalking behavior, considered whether stress or medication changes could trigger it. I examined my kitchen. The pan I would have used was in the cabinet, dry, unused. The eggs in my refrigerator were not reduced in number. I had not made these eggs. I ate them anyway, because I was hungry and they were eggs, and the absurdity of throwing away a perfectly good breakfast in my own apartment felt like a capitulation to irrationality. They were good eggs, well seasoned, slightly more butter than I use. The second morning, oatmeal, honey and brown sugar, a side of sliced banana. Again, directly outside the bedroom door, arranged with a consideration that suggests the person arranging it cared about presentation. Again, my kitchen showed no evidence of its preparation. Third morning, nothing. I felt, irrationally, slightly disappointed. Fourth morning, French toast. This is not something I make for myself. I don't dislike French toast, but it wouldn't occur to me to make it on a weekday. It was very good. I installed a camera, a small security camera pointed at my bedroom door from the hallway, positioned so it would capture the full corridor from bedroom to kitchen. I reviewed the footage the morning after the first food appearance following the camera's installation. The footage showed my hallway, empty, dark, because the hallway light was off, and I had not thought to leave it on. But the camera had night vision, and the footage was interpretable. At 4:47 a.m., there was something. I have watched this footage many times, and I am going to describe it as carefully as I can. The footage showed what might be described as a visual disturbance, not a person, not an animal, but a disruption in the visual field, as if the camera's night vision was struggling with something that had a different relationship to light than solid objects do. In the area just outside my bedroom door, the footage showed approximately 90 seconds of this disturbance. Then the disturbance resolved. In the following frame, there was a plate on the floor. I watched 90 seconds of something leaving food outside my door. I cannot tell you what the something was. The camera could not tell me what the something was. I tried leaving a note. I taped it to my bedroom door. "Who are you?" It was gone in the morning. In its place, a bowl of congee with ginger and a soft-boiled egg and a folded piece of paper. The paper said, "Someone who worries." I tried writing back. I put a note on the door. "What do you worry about?" The next morning, crepes with lemon and powdered sugar and a note. "You don't eat enough. I cannot dispute this. I was going through a difficult period, a bad breakup, work stress, the particular neglect of self that those things produce. I had been eating badly and not regularly." I wrote, "How do you know that?" The response, the following morning, accompanied by a full breakfast with fresh squeezed juice. "I have always known. I've been worried for a while." I wrote, "How long?" No note in response. Just a very good cup of coffee, covered with a small plate to keep it warm. It has been 4 months since the food started appearing. I have not found an explanation that satisfies the camera footage and the kitchen evidence and the notes. I have a working hypothesis, not scientific, not documented, just mine, that my apartment has been occupied longer than I have occupied it, and that whatever occupied it before me has not entirely left, and that it is, in its way, domestic, housekeeping in nature, concerned with the well-being of whoever lives in the space it considers its own. I have eaten the food every morning. I leave the notes. The notes get answered in food more than in words, which feels appropriate for an entity whose primary mode of expression is apparently nourishment. I am eating better. Regularly. Varied and well-prepared meals that I did not make and cannot explain. I am not telling my friends, because there is no version of this story that does not sound like a mental health concern. I am telling you, whoever you are, because I need to tell someone. Someone is feeding me. Someone who has been here longer than I have, who worries about whether I eat enough, who communicates in crepes and congee and fresh squeezed juice. I don't know what it is. I know that the coffee is always the right temperature, and the eggs are always well seasoned, and when I write a note on my bedroom door, something reads it. I am, in the strangest way, not alone. And the aloneness of my 6 years in that apartment, which I had adjusted to and accepted and thought of as simply the condition of my life, is no longer entirely true. Something is there, something that worries. And every morning, when I open my bedroom door and nearly step on a plate of something warm and carefully made, I think, someone made this for me. And I eat it. And I am grateful. Story 6 of 20. The security camera recorded tomorrow. I work in security technology. I have worked in this field for 11 years. I know cameras, their limitations, their failure modes, their artifacts, the specific ways they can malfunction, and the specific signatures those malfunctions leave in the footage. When the cameras at my client's building began producing footage that appeared to show events that had not yet occurred, my professional first response was to find the technical explanation. I am still looking for it. 3 years later. My name is Howard Bell. I run a small security consulting firm. The building in question was a commercial facility, a mid-sized office building whose specific purpose I have been asked not to disclose. My firm had installed and was maintaining a 12-camera system covering the lobby, elevators, parking structure, and main corridors. The anomaly was first noticed by a facility manager who reviewed overnight footage and flagged a discrepancy. The camera covering the main lobby entrance, she said, showed footage that didn't match the building's activity logs. She was specifically referring to footage from camera 1, the primary lobby entrance, time-stamped 2 a.m. on a Thursday. The footage showed activity at 2 a.m. that the access logs recorded as happening at 2 p.m. 10 hours off. My first response was clock sync error. The camera's internal clock had drifted, a common and mundane issue. I scheduled a maintenance visit. When I reviewed the footage myself, I noticed something that the facility manager had not. The footage was not from the previous 2 a.m. It was from the following 2 p.m. This distinction took me several hours to confirm, and I want to explain how I confirmed it, because it matters. The lobby footage at 2 a.m. showed 12 people entering and exiting the building over a 3-hour period. I cross-referenced each person against the access control logs, the card swipes and fob readings that create a record of who enters and exits. The 12 people I could identify in the footage matched the access logs for the following day's 2 p.m. period exactly. Not approximately, exactly. 12 people, in the same order, with the same entry and exit pattern, down to the direction they turned when they entered the lobby. The camera had recorded the following day's 2 p.m. as that night's 2 a.m. I documented this and said nothing while I tried to understand it. I reviewed the remaining 11 cameras. 8 of them were normal, current footage, time accurate, matching the access logs for their recorded periods. 3 of them were showing future footage. Camera 4, in the parking structure, was running approximately 36 hours ahead. Camera 7, covering the east corridor, was approximately 4 hours ahead. Camera 1, the lobby, was exactly 10 hours ahead. No consistent offset. No technical failure mode that produces different time offsets on different cameras in the same system. I know of no hardware fault, no software glitch, no network synchronization error that produces forward time footage. Forward time footage is not a failure mode because it is not possible. The footage being recorded was real people, real events, cross-checked against subsequent access logs. It was not fabricated footage. It was accurate documentation of events that had not yet occurred at the time of recording. I confirmed this over 6 weeks of careful observation. I would review Camera One's footage from the previous night, note the events shown, and then watch the building during the following day. Everything Camera One had shown would happen, in the same order, with the same people, with the same movements. The camera was showing me tomorrow. I told no one for 6 weeks. This was professionally irresponsible. And I am aware of that. I told no one because there was no version of this disclosure that did not involve me saying things that would be career-ending, and because I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I described it to anyone who might act on it. In week 7, I did something I have spent time since examining. I watched Camera One's footage from the overnight period, which showed the following day's 2 p.m. activity. And I saw something happen in the lobby that I categorized as significant. A person fell. Not dramatically, they slipped at the lobby entrance, went down hard, and spent approximately 30 seconds on the floor before being helped up by 2 others. A fall that looked like it could result in an injury. I noted the timestamp in the footage. The event would occur, by my calculations, at 2:17 p.m. the following day. At 2:15 p.m., I placed a call to the facility manager. I told her there was a loose mat at the lobby entrance that was creating a slip hazard and should be secured immediately. She did not ask me how I knew. She had it addressed before 2:17 p.m. At 2:17 p.m., a person entered the lobby, approached the spot where the mat had been, and because the mat was now secured, did not fall. I had used the camera's future footage to prevent something. I don't know how to categorize this. I am a security professional. I document, I analyze, I report. I don't intervene based on footage that technically should not exist and cannot be explained. I reported the camera anomaly eventually. I described it as a time-stamping error with an unusual signature. The manufacturer's engineers examined the system and found no fault they could identify. The cameras were eventually replaced. The replacement cameras are normal. They record the present, as cameras do. I still have the 6 weeks of footage from Camera One and the correlation logs I built to cross-check it. Stored offline, not networked. In the footage, tomorrow. Ordinary tomorrow, people going to work, going home, moving through a lobby. But 10 hours early. Quietly, without drama, without announcement. The camera just knew. I think about what else in the world knows things early. What other systems, built by human hands or otherwise, receive tomorrow before it arrives. I check security footage more carefully than I used to. I look at timestamps. I look for the small offness, the slight discrepancy, the footage that shows people you haven't seen yet. I haven't found it again. But I look. Because once you know a camera can record tomorrow, you can't look at footage the same way. You can't entirely trust that what you're seeing has already happened. Story 7 of 20. The forest returned. Everything it took. Except one person. There is a forest in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that has taken things. I know this because I have spoken to 7 people who have lost something in it. And because I am one of those 7 people. And because for 3 years I have been following the returns, the specific, inexplicable returns of objects that had been lost in the forest for months or years, and tracking the one absence in an otherwise complete pattern. My name is Thomas Gray. I am a former park ranger currently writing about the natural world in ways that my former colleagues find irregular. The forest I am referring to is a stretch of mixed hardwood and conifer in Marquette County. It is not a named wilderness area. It is simply the forest that the locals in two nearby small communities refer to by a name that translates roughly to the returning forest, which should have told me something before I spent 18 months working in it. I lost my father's watch in the forest in the autumn of 2019. A pocket watch, silver, a 1940s railroad watch that had been my father's and his father's before him. I lost it on a trail section I have walked dozens of times, in conditions that should not have permitted its loss. I was wearing it on a chain in my breast pocket. The chain was intact when I reached the trailhead, and the watch was not there. 3 hours of searching the trail produced nothing. 14 months later, the watch was on my front porch, in a small wooden box I did not recognize. The box had no markings, no note. The watch was inside, in perfect condition, wound and running correctly. I started asking around. I knew the area, I knew the communities, I knew who to ask. I found 6 other people who had lost objects in that section of forest and had received them back on their porches in wooden boxes without explanation after periods ranging from 6 weeks to 2 years. A child's shoe, a set of car keys, a journal, a camera with an intact memory card, a pair of binoculars, a dog's collar. I confirmed each one. I spoke to each person. All of them had found the returned object on their porch in a wooden box within the previous 3 years. All of the objects had been returned, except one. Margaret Cole went into the forest on the 15th of June, 2018, to look for her dog, which had run off the trail. She was an experienced hiker, a woman who had lived near that forest for 30 years and knew it in all its seasons. She did not come back. The search was thorough. County search and rescue, volunteer searchers, dogs. Nothing. Margaret Cole's disappearance remained unexplained and remains, officially, an open missing persons case. Her dog came home 2 days after she disappeared, unharmed, well-fed, its collar intact. It waited on her front porch, which is a thing that dogs do. I spoke to her daughter, Emma, who now lives in the house. Emma told me that she had been watching for a wooden box on the porch since she learned about the pattern. 2 years of watching. Nothing. The forest has returned everything it took from those 6 other people. Keys, cameras, journals, a child's shoe. It has not returned Margaret Cole. I have gone back into the forest many times since I identified the pattern. I walk the trail section where Margaret was last seen. I look at the trees, the underbrush, the particular quality of light in that part of the forest, which has, and I say this as a former ranger who has spent years learning to read forests, a quality of attention, a quality of being present in a way that forests usually are not. Most forests are ecosystems. This part of this forest feels like an ecosystem that is also doing something else. Paying attention, processing. I have found no trace of Margaret, nor has anyone else. My theory, which I hold loosely and without confidence. The forest takes things by accident. Objects fall from pockets, get left on trails, get separated from their owners in the ordinary way of things lost in wilderness. And the forest, whatever the forest is doing when it is doing the other thing, the paying attention thing, finds them and eventually returns them. It cannot return Margaret because Margaret is not an object. Because whatever took her is not the same mechanism that takes car keys and pocket watches. Because she went in looking for her dog, which was already found and home. And whatever she found instead is something that doesn't get packed in a wooden box and left on a porch. Or, and this is the other theory, the darker one, the one I think about at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. The forest is still working on it. The watches and cameras came back in weeks or months. Maybe some things take longer. Maybe some things require the forest to work harder at the returning. Maybe Emma Cole will wake up one morning and find a wooden box on the front porch. And inside it, something of her mother's, something that was kept well in the dark and the quiet of whatever keeping the forest does. Something returned in the end, like everything else. I walk the trail, I look at the trees, I watch for boxes on porches. The forest is patient. I am trying to be. Story 8 of 20. My reflection started living without me. I want to be medically rigorous about this. I want you to know that I have been evaluated. I have seen a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and an ophthalmologist. I have had an MRI, a visual field test, and several conversations with professionals who specialize in perceptual disorders. The medical consensus is that I am physiologically normal, and that what I am experiencing does not correspond to any documented neurological condition. I am telling you this not to preempt skepticism, but because the medical evaluations are part of the record, and the record matters. My name is Sarah Vance. I am 34 years old, a high school English teacher, a person without a history of mental illness or perceptual disturbance. What I am about to describe has been occurring for 8 months. My reflection is not doing what I do. I want to be precise about when this departs from the ordinary. Reflections that are slightly delayed, that don't quite match. These are experiences that have explanations, and I am not describing those. What I am describing is a reflection that performs different actions from the ones I am performing, in real time, in the same mirror. The first instance, I was brushing my teeth. I looked up at the bathroom mirror. My reflection was not brushing its teeth. It was looking at me directly, without the slight offset of eyes meeting in mirror that is the normal experience. Looking directly, as if the eyes in the mirror were not reflected, but oriented. The toothbrush in its hand was at its side. I stopped moving. My reflection stopped too. I raised my right hand. My reflection raised its left, the correct mirror response. Normal. I went back to brushing. My reflection went back to looking at me. I stepped out of the bathroom. I counted to 5. I stepped back in. My reflection was brushing its teeth. I have spent 8 months in a very specific kind of relationship with my own mirrors. I have learned certain things from this relationship. The reflection is not consistent in its divergence, most of the time, perhaps 90% of the time. It does exactly what I do. It is in the remaining 10% that it does other things. What things? It stands when I sit. It looks at the window when I look at the floor. It adjusts its hair when I have not moved my hands. Once, in the hallway mirror, it was walking away from me, walking away from the mirror, into the reflected depth of the reflected hallway. While I stood still, I watched it walk until it was too small to see clearly, and then it was not there. And then I looked away, and when I looked back, it was normal. I have tried to communicate with it. I have stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said things. Most of the time, my reflection moves its lips when I move mine, and I cannot determine whether it is saying the same thing or not. Once, I am certain of this. It spoke before I did. I was standing at the mirror at about 10 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, working up to saying something, and my reflection spoke first. I could not hear what it said. I watched it speak, and then I said what I had been going to say, and my reflection continued to speak for approximately 3 seconds after I had stopped. I have covered most of the mirrors in my apartment. Not all. I left the bathroom mirror because avoiding it entirely felt like a concession I wasn't ready to make. I check in with it every morning. Most mornings, normal. Some mornings, it looks at me while I look at it, and neither of us speaks. What I have developed over 8 months is a theory. It is not a medical theory or a scientific theory. It is a theory about identity and about what reflections are. We think of a reflection as a copy. It isn't. A reflection is what the mirror makes of you. Your image processed through a surface and returned. The reflection is made of light and physics, not of you. It is the mirror's interpretation. Most interpretations are faithful. Most of the time, the mirror makes a perfect copy. But the reflection has been, in some sense, making itself for a long time. Every time you look in a mirror, the reflection is there. It has been there, in one mirror or another, for as long as you have been alive. It has accumulated whatever accumulates in a copy when the copy is made often enough and watched closely enough. Maybe, at some point, the copy starts to diverge. Not dramatically, not completely, just in small ways. Standing when you sit, adjusting its hair when you haven't moved, looking at you while you look at it, living, a little, on its own. I don't know if this is what has happened. I don't know if it's frightening or fascinating or both. I only know what the mirror shows me, mostly me, doing what I do, being my reflection in the ordinary way. And sometimes something that is almost me, but not quite, doing something almost mine, but different, in the small hours of a Tuesday when the light is low and the bathroom is quiet. Living, a little, without me. Story 9 of 20. The house across the street was watching me. I moved to the neighborhood in April, which is the best time of year to move somewhere new. Everything is opening up. The light is lengthening. The world has that quality of possibility that spring provides, and that it immediately begins withdrawing as summer arrives. I was optimistic. I am a person who makes decisions and commits to them, and the house on Callaway Street was a good decision by most measures. The house across the street was not a good variable. My name is Ben Forrester. I am an architect, which I mention because it is professionally relevant. I look at buildings, I look at them carefully, with the training of a person whose work requires understanding how structures express themselves, the way a building's proportions signal its era and purpose, the way windows function as both eyes and signaling devices, the particular grammar of facades that architects spend years learning to read. I read the house across the street, and it was reading me back. This is not a metaphor. I understand that it sounds like one. An architect says a building is watching him, and you think, projection, professional habit, the pathetic fallacy. Buildings don't watch. They express, they signal, they organize space and light, but they don't watch. Let me be specific. The house is a 2-story colonial, probably from the 1970s, in good repair. Beige siding, 2 front-facing windows on the upper floor and 3 on the lower, a covered front porch. Normal, unremarkable. In my first week on Callaway Street, I noticed that the curtains in the upper right window were always parted in the same way. The same inch-wide gap, precisely centered, at all hours of the day and night. This is not unusual. A curtain can stay parted. But the parting moved. Not dramatically, not swinging open or billowing. The gap shifted. Day to day, or within a day, the parting of those curtains was at a different position. Sometimes centered, sometimes left, sometimes right. And the position of the gap corresponded, and this is what I am going to have difficulty conveying without sounding like a man who is fixated on his neighbor's window. It corresponded to where I was in my own house. when I worked at my desk by the front window. Gap centered on my desk. When I cooked in the kitchen, visible through the kitchen window on the side of my house, gap shifted right toward my kitchen. When I was visible in my second-floor bedroom window, gap shifted upward and right. The curtain was tracking me. I documented this over 3 weeks. I am an architect, and I document things. I have the photographs, I have the notes with timestamps, I have the correlation table I built between my location in my house and the gap position in that window across the street. The correlation was not perfect, maybe 70%, but it was far above chance, and it was consistent. I spoke to my neighbor on the right, a woman named Diane who had lived on Callaway Street for 11 years. I asked her about the house across the street. She went quiet in a particular way. "Do you know who lives there?" I said. "It's been empty for 3 years," she said. "Old woman lived there before. She died." She looked at the house. "Her family maintains it, keeps it up from a distance. Nobody's moved in." "Empty," I said. "Has been," she said. That night, at 11 p.m., I looked at the house from my front window. The upper right window's curtains, gap centered. I was at my front window. The gap was centered on my front window. In the lower right window, on the first floor, a light. On for perhaps 30 seconds, then off. On again for 10 seconds. Off. I went to the front door. I opened it and stood on my porch and looked at the house directly. The lower window light was on, steady now. And in the curtain gap in the upper window, a shape. Not a person, not the distinct shape of a face or a figure. A presence behind the curtain, something that displaced the fabric slightly, that altered the quality of the gap. Something that was looking out. I went back inside. I closed my door. I sat with my back to the wall that faces the street and thought about an empty house whose curtain gap tracked my movements through my own home and whose windows lit up when I came outside. Diane had more to tell me over coffee the following week. The old woman who had lived there, her name had been Frances, she said, had been reclusive in her later years. Rarely came out. Watched the street from her windows, Diane thought. It had made some neighbors uncomfortable, the degree of attention Frances had paid to the street from behind her curtains. Frances had died 3 years ago. The house had been empty since. The curtains in the upper window still moved. The gap still followed me around my house. I asked Diane if anyone else on the street had noticed anything about the empty house. She was quiet. Then, the Hendersons moved last fall. Said they felt watched. She wrapped her hands around her mug. And the family before them, same thing. Same thing. The house across the street, empty with no one in it. Watched. Tracked. Lit its windows at night when residents came to their doors. What Frances did in her final years. Watching the street from behind her curtains, paying close, continuous attention to the neighborhood, to the people in it, to the lives happening across the street. I think she did it long enough and completely enough that it became a property of the house. Some habits outlast the people who have them. Some attention becomes architectural. Some houses keep watching after the watcher is gone. I've gotten used to it. The curtain gap moves. The windows are lit sometimes when I come outside. I've started thinking of it as a kind of neighborhood watch, something keeping an eye on Callaway Street the only way it still can. I wave at the upper window sometimes. The gap doesn't shift when I do, but I think Frances sees it. I think she's glad someone finally acknowledged her. Story 10 of 20. Every time I fell asleep, someone moved my furniture. Let me establish the baseline. I am a light sleeper who lives alone in a second-floor apartment with a deadbolted door and windows that I lock every night without exception. I have no history of parasomnia. I have no history of sleepwalking. I keep my apartment very specifically organized because I work from home in a small space. And organization is the difference between functional and chaotic. And I know where everything is with the precision of a person who depends on that knowledge. I know where my furniture is. I knew where it was each night when I fell asleep. And I knew every morning for 6 weeks last autumn that it was no longer where I had left it. My name is Claire Morgan. I will describe the changes in order as I documented them. Night 1. I woke to find my desk chair had been moved from behind my desk to the center of the room, facing the window. The distance was perhaps 4 feet. The chair is heavy, a proper ergonomic chair with a weighted base. Moving it requires effort. Night 2. The small bookshelf on the east wall had been turned 90 degrees. Its books were in the same order. It was now facing south. Night 3. Nothing. I checked everything carefully. Nothing had been moved. Night 4. The kitchen table had been moved 8 inches to the left. Exactly 8 inches I measured, because I am that person. The table is not heavy, but the 4 chairs around it were undisturbed, which requires moving the table without disturbing the chairs. Night 5. My bed. I want to dwell on this one, because waking to find your bed in a different position while you are in it is an experience for which I do not have good language. I woke at my usual time, reached for my phone on the nightstand, found that the nightstand was not where I expected it. The bed had been moved, rotated, very slightly, perhaps 15 degrees from its usual position against the wall. My head was no longer pointing north. Small difference, enough to make every reach for every familiar thing go slightly wrong. I set up cameras after night 5. 3 of them: bedroom, living room, kitchen, night vision, full coverage. I reviewed the footage from night 6, during which nothing was moved. I reviewed the footage from night 7. At 3:22 a.m., the desk chair in the living room moved. In the camera footage, the chair moved smoothly, a slow rotation toward the window. There was nothing visible moving it. No person, no mechanism, no visible force. The chair rotated on its base and settled, and was still. The footage from nights 8, 9, and 10 showed similar events. Furniture moving without a mover, at hours between 2 and 4 a.m. Slowly and with apparent purpose. I say apparent purpose because the rearrangements were not random. I realized this around week 4 of the documentation. The furniture was being rearranged according to a logic. The desk chair moving to face the window. The bookshelf rotating toward the south. The table shifting to improve traffic flow through the kitchen. The bed rotating to take better advantage of the morning light. The apartment was being optimized. I am not an interior designer. I arranged my apartment quickly when I moved in, functionally, without attention to light or flow or the subtler considerations of how a space can be arranged to serve the person in it. Whatever was rearranging my furniture at 3 a.m. was making better choices than I had made. By week 6, my apartment was better. I recognize this with the frustration of a person who has been improved without being asked. The desk chair facing the window meant I could look up from work at a view rather than a wall. The bookshelf's new orientation made the titles easier to read in the room's natural light. The bed's new angle meant I woke to sunlight rather than shadow. It was, objectively, a more livable apartment. I left a note, the way I've heard of other people in these situations, leaving notes. On the kitchen table, in clear view, "Who are you and why are you moving my furniture?" In the morning, no note in response. But the kitchen table had been moved back to its original position. I wrote, "Please put it back." It was better where you moved it. In the morning, the table was in the optimized position. The furniture moving stopped after week 6. Everything stayed where it had been moved to. My apartment has been still at night for 4 months. I have made one additional change in the interim. I rearranged the spare room, which my invisible furniture mover had not addressed. I did it deliberately badly. Desk facing the wall, chair in the corner, bookshelf blocking the window. I woke the following morning to find it done correctly. Desk at an angle for the best light, chair accessible, bookshelf moved to not block the window. I think my apartment has had a better designer than me working in it. I think this designer works at 3 a.m. when I am asleep and the space can be assessed without my interference. I think the designer has now finished, for now, has gotten the apartment into the shape it considers correct. I am living in someone else's vision of my apartment. A vision that is, I have to admit, better than mine. I've stopped fighting it. I've started studying it instead. The choices made, the logic applied, the way the space has been organized to serve the person who uses it. I am learning a great deal about interior arrangement from an entity I have never seen, working at 3 a.m. with furniture it has no hands to move. I am taking notes. I am grateful. In the strained way you are grateful for a lesson you didn't ask for. That the teacher knew what I needed. The voice inside, my smoke detector, knew my name. The smoke detector began chirping in February, which is the time of year when batteries die, the cold draws them down, and suddenly every device in your home that requires a battery begins registering its objection simultaneously. I registered the chirp mentally as a task for the weekend and continued with my week. On Thursday night, the smoke detector did not chirp. It spoke. My name is Joseph Ellis. I am a 51-year-old accountant, a person whose professional life is built on the assumption that numbers behave according to rules and that exceptions to those rules have explanations. I am not imaginative in the direction of the supernatural. I do not seek strange experiences. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what I heard was not filtered through any predisposition toward the uncanny. The smoke detector is in the hallway, mounted to the ceiling. Standard 9-volt battery-operated unit, about 3 years old. It chirped at 11 p.m. on Thursday, one chirp, the battery warning pattern, and then, in the silence after the chirp, in the small acoustic space that a hallway has, I heard, Joseph. Not from the television, not from outside, from the hallway ceiling, from the direction of the smoke detector. I am an accountant. My response to unexplained data is to verify it, then verify it again. I stood in the hallway for 2 minutes. Silence. I went back to my living room and sat down. 30 seconds later, the chirp. And in the silence after the chirp, Joseph again. Same voice. Quiet, level. The voice of someone who is not sure they're being heard and is trying not to startle. I went back to the hallway. I looked at the smoke detector. I said loudly, feeling fully ridiculous, "Who is there?" Silence. Then, the chirp pattern. Not one chirp, but 2. The different pattern. And in the silence following the second chirp, so quiet I might have missed it. I am here. I pulled a chair from the kitchen. I stood on the chair in the hallway and put my ear close to the smoke detector. It chirped. Close up, the chirp was louder and more complex than it sounds from a distance, a frequency-rich sound. And when it resolved, "Joseph, are you listening?" "Yes," I said, to a smoke detector, in my hallway, at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. The voice did not come through the chirp again that night. I replaced the battery on Friday morning. The detector stopped chirping. On Friday night, with the new battery, one chirp at midnight, And in the silence, I can hear better now. I have had the smoke detector for 3 years. The voice has been in it since February, and I don't know how long before that. A smoke detector with a voice that knows my name and comments on battery quality is not something I have a framework for. But I am an accountant, and so I built a ledger. What the voice has said, over 3 months. My name, various times. Asking if I'm listening. That it can hear better now, after the new battery. That it is worried about something in the building's wiring. This proved accurate, as an electrician found a potential issue 2 weeks after the voice mentioned it. That I should call my sister. I called my sister, and she was, in fact, having a very bad week. That the winter was ending. That it is glad I'm here. This last one came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, not at night, in daylight. A single chirp, and then the words so clear that I stopped what I was doing and stood still in the hallway for a moment. I am glad you are here. I said, I'm glad I'm here too. Then I stood in my hallway feeling the specific social awkwardness of someone who has just had a genuine exchange with their smoke detector. I have not replaced the detector. I should. It is 3 years old and due for replacement. I have not. I don't know what the voice is. I have 3 hypotheses that I rotate between. A previous tenant whose death in this apartment went unrecorded, and whose presence has found the only electronic medium available to it. Something that finds the specific frequency of a smoke detector's chirp a usable channel. Or something I have no category for at all. The practical information has been accurate. The wiring warning, which I acted on. The sister call, which mattered. These are things that a voice from a smoke detector should not know and did. And the last thing, the gladness that I am there, is the thing I think about most, not as alarming, as something else. As the particular comfort of being known by something in the space you live in, of having a presence in your home that is aware of you and finds your presence good. I live alone. I work alone. I am not a person who lacks for things to do, but I am a person who comes home to an empty apartment and experiences the particular quality of that emptiness as simply the condition of my life. My smoke detector knows my name. My smoke detector is glad I'm here. I don't have a framework for what this is. But when the chirp comes in the night and the voice says my name in the hallway dark, I say, I'm here, I'm listening. And it says, I know. And I go back to bed. And I am less alone than I was. Story 12 of 20. The library had a book about my death. I have spent a great deal of time thinking about the question of whether a book about your death is better or worse than not knowing. I have come down, over the 2 years since I found it, in an uncomfortable middle position. The finding was terrible, and the knowing is terrible, and I would not, if I could reach back, choose to have read it. But I cannot unread it, and so the question is academic. My name is Ann Rossi. I am a librarian. The professional dimension of this account is not incidental. I know libraries, I know catalogs, I know the physical and organizational logic of how books exist in library systems. I know what a properly cataloged book looks like, and I know what a catalog anomaly looks like. What I found in the Central Branch on a Tuesday in March was not a catalog anomaly, which is the part I cannot resolve. I was working a closing shift. The branch closes at 8, and the period from 7 to close is a gradual winding down, patrons thinning out, the building quieting, the particular late shift routine of shelving and resetting that I have done hundreds of times. I was pushing a returns cart through the biography section when the spine caught my eye. The spine had my name. Not my name as an author, Rossi, Anne, in the standard last-first format of the subject catalog. My name as a subject. Rossi, Anne, the name above the title on the spine, indicating the person the book was about. I stopped the cart. I looked at the book. I pulled it from the shelf. It was a standard hardcover biography, or had the appearance of one. The kind of solid, moderately sized volume that a library biography section is full of. The cover had a black and white photograph of a woman I did not immediately recognize. Though recognition came a moment later in the way recognition of your own image in an unexpected context takes time. The woman in the photograph was me, approximately my current age, which placed the photograph as recent. But I had no memory of having it taken. I am going to describe what I did next precisely, because the sequence matters. I did not open the book immediately. I looked at the spine, the cover, the back cover, which had a brief description in the style of a biography's back cover text, summarizing the subject's life and significance. The back cover did not tell me how I died. It told me what my life had amounted to, in the retrospective language of biography. And I am not going to reproduce that here, because it is mine. Then I opened the book. I did not read it. I want to be honest about this. I tried to read it and found, very quickly, that my eyes would not cooperate. That reading one's own biography in a book that is physically present in the library where you work is not something the mind processes in any linear way. I got through the first page and a half, and then I closed it. The page and a half I read was accurate. The specifics of my childhood, my family, my path to librarianship, accurate. Not publicly available information, not the kind of thing that a biographical compilation from published sources would contain. Personal, accurate, mine. I checked the catalog. No record of the book in the system, no ISBN, no acquisition record, no catalog entry. The book existed on the shelf, but not in the library's records. I checked the spine label, the Dewey Decimal Call number on the sticker. The number was in the biography range, but, when I cross-referenced it, belonged to a book about someone else. The physical label was wrong, or the system was wrong, or both. I took the book home. I did not check it out, because it was not in the system, and I did not know how to check out a book that did not officially exist. I have read 7 more pages since bringing it home. 7 pages in 2 years. I read a page or two and then close it and do not open it again for weeks. I am not reading it in order. I flip to sections and read a page and close it again. I am getting the book in fragments. What I have read, accurate, specific, mine. My professional life, my relationships, my mistakes. The book is not flattering, but it is not cruel. It has the tone of a biography that is attempting fairness, that sees its subject clearly and without the desire to diminish. There is a chapter near the end that I've looked at once, briefly, before closing the book immediately. The chapter is titled, "The Manner of It." I have not read it. I am not going to read it. I have decided, in the way that decisions get made when there is no good option, that knowing the shape of my death in advance is not a gift, but a weight, and that I will carry enough weight in the time remaining without adding that one. The book is in my closet, on the upper shelf, behind some other things. I know it's there every day. I think about it every day. I am a librarian who has a book she will not read. I don't know where it came from. I don't know whose biography section it belongs to, or whose catalog has it, or who compiled it, or who authorized its existence. I don't know if all of us have one somewhere, a volume in some library waiting on some shelf. I know the chapter titled, "The Manner of It" exists, and that it is waiting. I am not ready. I am not going to be ready. and the book will wait, patient as libraries are patient. For the day, it becomes the only record. Story 13 of 20. I answered a phone call from myself. The call came in at 7:14 p.m. on a Friday. I know the exact time because I looked at the phone before I answered, a reflex. And the time was 7:14, and the name on the screen was my own. My name is Eric Walsh. I am a systems analyst by profession. My name on the screen of my own phone, calling my own phone, is a technological impossibility of a specific and well-understood kind. A phone cannot call itself. The number that called me was my own mobile number, which I verified after the call by checking my recent calls list. My number had called me. I answered. There was a sound that I am going to describe, for lack of better language, as distance. The specific quality of a connection that has traveled a long way, not degraded, not static heavy, but with a depth to the silence between words that suggests the signal has covered ground. Then my own voice. I am going to note that hearing your own voice from a phone is a strange experience under any circumstances. We don't hear ourselves as others hear us. And a recording or call transmission emphasizes the gap between self-perception and acoustic reality. I recognize the voice as mine, the way you recognize a photograph of yourself. With a slight dissociation, a moment of adjustment before the recognition settles. The voice said, "You need to listen carefully. I don't know how long this connection holds." I said, "Who is this?" I know how that sounds. I knew who it was. I asked anyway because I had not yet caught up. The voice said, "It's you. It's Eric." I know that's not helpful, but I don't have time to establish it. There's something I need to tell you. I sat down. I was standing in my kitchen, and I sat down on the floor of my kitchen, which is not something I do, but my legs made the decision for me. I said, "Okay." What followed was a conversation of approximately 6 minutes. I have written down everything I remember of it. I am not going to reproduce the full content here because parts of it are personal in a way that is mine and not for publication, and because one part of it involves information that I have been told, by the voice that is me, not to make widely known. What I will tell you, the voice told me something that was going to happen. A specific event, timed with specifics I could verify. The event involved someone I care about and a decision they were going to make, and a way in which I could, if I acted, affect the outcome. I acted. The event occurred as described. The outcome was affected as the voice said it could be. I am not going to tell you whether the outcome was good or prevented bad, because those are categories that apply differently depending on your position in the situation. And I am not in a position to characterize other people's experiences. What I will tell you, the event was real. The call was real. The outcome was real. I asked the voice myself. One question before the call dropped. "When are you calling from?" A pause. Then, "I don't know exactly." Later, "Further." "How much further?" "I'm not sure the math translates," the voice said. And then, "You'll figure out that the math doesn't matter. That's something I can tell you." The call dropped. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while. Then I made the call I needed to make to the person I needed to call, and I said what I had been told to say. Then I sat with the fact of what had happened and tried to think about it rigorously. I am a systems analyst. I think about information, about how it moves, about what can travel and what cannot and under what conditions. I know that information about the future cannot travel backward in time under any currently understood physical framework. I know that a phone cannot call itself. I know that a voice cannot be both the person speaking and the person on the other end of the call simultaneously. I know all of these things, and I also know what happened. The math doesn't matter, the voice said. I am trying to learn what that means. I think it means that whatever the mechanism was, whatever allowed a call to cross from later to now, the mechanism is not mine to understand. The information arrived. The information was used. The outcome occurred. The math doesn't matter. What matters is that I answered. What matters is that I listened. I have wondered since whether the version of me who made that call knew, before he made it, that I would answer. Whether there's a version of this event where I didn't pick up, where I saw my own name on the screen and put the phone down. Whether the call gets made regardless, and it's only the answering that differs. I think I would answer. I think if I found myself in whatever place that call was made from, I would make it. I would trust myself to listen. I do trust myself to listen. The phone call proved it. I am trying to become the version of me who makes the call worth making. Further, later, working on it. Story 14 of 20. The neighbor never came outside. During the day, I want to be a careful witness to this, because being a careful witness is something I value. I am a retired police detective, 22 years on the job, and the habits of careful witnessing don't leave you when you leave the profession. I note things. I note when things I've noted change. I note when the change doesn't have an ordinary explanation. My name is Frank DeLuca. I moved to Sycamore Lane 3 years ago, after my wife passed. A quieter neighborhood, closer to my daughter's family, the kind of place where retirees live and lawns are kept, and the block association sends enthusiastic emails about holiday decoration contests. Normal. The neighbor in the brown house, 2 houses down, I'll call him Mr. Hale, because that's the name he gave me, though I have reasons to doubt it, which I'll get to. Moved in about 6 months after I did. I noticed his arrival the way you notice a new neighbor. A moving truck, some boxes, the particular activity of a new occupancy being established. He was pleasant when I introduced myself. 60s, tall, thin, a handshake that was correct in its firmness. He said he worked from home, that he kept irregular hours, that he hoped he wouldn't be a bother. He was not a bother. He also, in 3 years, never came outside during daylight hours. I want to be specific. I noted this by the end of the first month. He had a dog, a large, dark-colored dog that needed walking, and the dog was walked after dark. The mail was retrieved after dark. The car in his driveway, when it moved after dark and returned before dawn. I spoke to other neighbors. The Hendersons on the other side of him had noted the same thing. Wendy from across the street had assumed he was a night shift worker. The general neighborhood assessment was odd but harmless. My professional assessment, potentially relevant. I began keeping a log. The date, the time of any observed activity at the Brown house, whether that activity occurred in daylight or darkness. Over 6 months. 47 observed activities. All 47 in darkness. The most marginal was in deep winter, late afternoon, when the sky was nearly dark at 4:30 p.m. He retrieved his mail at 4:28 p.m. before complete dark, but in conditions that I would characterize as civil twilight rather than daylight. I knocked on his door one evening. He answered promptly. We talked on his porch for 20 minutes. He was engaged, intelligent, easy to talk to. I noted his porch light was behind him, and he was standing in its light, which was fine. When I asked if he'd like to get coffee sometime, he said he'd prefer evenings. I said, "You're never out during the day." He looked at me, not with alarm, with a kind of assessment that I recognized from interrogation rooms as the look of someone deciding how much to say. He said, "I have a condition, light sensitivity." Photophobia, I said. Something like that, he said. More severe. I am a retired detective. I believe people when what they say fits the observable facts, and I test the explanation against the observable facts rigorously. Photophobia is real. Severe photophobia does keep people indoors during daylight. The explanation fit. Except the kind of photophobia that keeps a person entirely indoors during all daylight hours is typically documented, typically treated, typically involves significant quality of life management. I asked my doctor about severe photophobia. She described it as a condition that is managed, that responds to tinted lenses and other interventions, that doesn't generally produce the complete diurnal absence I was observing. The kind of complete day avoidance I was documenting in Mr. Hale is not, my doctor said, consistent with any common photophobia diagnosis she was aware of. I ran his name through the resources available to a retired detective with connections. Hale is a common name. I found several people named Hale who might match the description. None matched precisely. The name felt used rather than given, which is an instinct, not a finding. Last winter, there was a power outage on Sycamore Lane. 3 days without electricity. On the second day, mid-afternoon, Mr. Hale's front door opened. He stood at the threshold, not outside in the doorway, in the shadow of the interior, with the door open. He looked at the street. He looked at the sky. He did not come out. But his face was fully visible in the diffuse gray light of an overcast February afternoon. And I was at my car, and I could see him clearly. He looked at the sky the way someone who has been away from something looks when they return to it. With recognition and with something more complicated than recognition. With loss, I think. The particular quality of a face that has given something up. He stayed in the doorway for about 5 minutes. The dog pushed past him at some point and stood on the porch and looked at the sky too, and Mr. Hale put his hand on the dog's head. Then he stepped back and closed the door. He has never come outside during daylight. He is, whatever he is, capable of existing in the dark indefinitely. He is, when the sky is overcast and the light is gray and diffuse, sometimes drawn to his doorway to look at what he is not going out into. I have given up the investigation in the sense of document gathering and record checking. There is no record to check that will tell me what Mr. Hale is. What I know, he is a good neighbor. He keeps his lawn managed at night. He waves when he sees me in the evenings. The dog is well cared for. No one on Sycamore Lane is frightened of him. Some things in the end don't need a file. Some cases you close by deciding that the thing you were investigating is not a threat to anyone and can be let alone. Mr. Hale is whatever he is. He comes out at night. The dog gets walked. He looked at the sky once in the February gray, the way a man looks at something he misses. I understand missing something. I understand looking at it from a doorway. Sometimes that's all you can do. I leave it there. Story 15 of 20. The train that never appeared on any schedule. I have loved trains since I was a child. This is relevant because it means that when I tell you I know trains, when I tell you I know schedules and routes and the particular behavior of rail systems in the specific way that enthusiasts know things, I mean it as a credential. I have ridden hundreds of routes on dozens of systems across North America and Europe. I know what a train on a published schedule looks like, and I know what a train that doesn't appear on any published schedule looks like. They look the same. That's the problem. My name is Owen Park. I am 56 years old and I work in municipal planning, which means I also understand transit infrastructure in the professional sense. The easements, the zoning, the capital funding, the operational logistics that make a passenger rail service exist. I know what it takes to run a train. I know that a train cannot run without infrastructure, without maintenance, without staff, without the long institutional tail that any moving vehicle on a public track requires. The train I am going to describe lacks all of this. It runs anyway. The station is a small one, a regional platform on a rail line that primarily serves freight, with limited scheduled passenger service on weekends. I have visited the station many times over the years because it is a beautiful station, Beaux-Arts architecture from the 1910s, better maintained than a station of its service level has any right to be. I have a sentimental relationship with this station. The train I first saw there was on a Thursday night in November at approximately 10:45 p.m. No Thursday passenger service is scheduled at this station. I was there because I was documenting the architecture for a preservation article. The train pulled in from the north at 10:47 p.m. I heard it before I saw it. The particular sound of a passenger train braking, different from freight, the squeal of steel on steel and the hiss of air brakes. It came in on the main platform track and stopped. It was a passenger train from the mid-20th century. Not a replica, not a heritage excursion, an actual service-era train, a streamliner of the type that operated in the 1940s and 50s, with that era's particular livery and window design. The paint scheme was one I recognized from photographs, a line that had operated on this route and ceased operations in 1962. I stood on the platform and watched it. The train was lit from within, passenger compartment lighting, the warm glow of occupied cars. I could see people inside. Not clearly, not in detail, but shapes in the windows, the movement of passengers in their seats. The train sat for approximately 4 minutes. No one boarded, no one disembarked. Then it pulled out, southbound, and was gone. I have returned to that station on Thursday nights 11 times since. The train has come 7 of those 11 times, always between 10:30 and 11 p.m., always from the north, always departing south, always the same livery, the same era, the same lit interior. I have photographed it. The photographs show a train on the platform. They show the windows and the exterior detail. They do not show the interior clearly enough to make out the passengers. The photographs are real. I have had them examined, and they show a mid-century streamliner in service-era condition on a platform in a contemporary station. I have researched the line that used this livery. It operated on this corridor from 1948 to 1962, when service was discontinued due to the usual combination of automobile culture and reduced ridership. The line is no more. The rolling stock was sold, scrapped, dispersed. None of it is operational in any documented sense. I found a reference in a local historical archive, a brief newspaper item from 1964, 2 years after the line ceased operation, noting that residents near the station had reported seeing trains of the old service passing through at night, despite the service having ended. The reporter had dismissed it as optical illusion or nostalgia. 1964. The train has been running its Thursday night route, apparently, since at least 1964. 60 years of a train that doesn't exist, carrying passengers I can't clearly see, to a destination southbound that I can't follow because the train outpaces any car by the time it leaves the platform. I have tried to be a systematic observer. I stand at the platform with my camera and my notebook, and I watch the windows as the train sits, and I count the shapes I can see in the cars. The count varies. Different Thursdays, different numbers. Some nights the train appears nearly empty, a few shapes, 1 or 2 per car. Some nights it appears full. I have developed a theory that I offer without confidence. The train serves its original passengers. The people who rode this line in its operational years, who took the Thursday evening southbound in 1948, in 1955, in 1961 are still riding it. The train still runs its last route. Its passengers are still arriving, still departing, still watching the countryside go by from the windows. Going wherever the southbound line goes when it goes there. I stand on the platform every Thursday I can manage it, and I watch a train that doesn't exist carry passengers that may not exist in the way I exist, and I feel each time the particular quality of a place that is occupied by two times simultaneously. The station in 1957. The station now. A platform that belongs to both. And the train crossing the boundary between them, neither here nor there. Running its route because routes, once established, don't always stop when the company does. Because some journeys just keep going. Because the ticket has been bought. The destination remains.
Une semaine entière avant la Saint-Michel, le brouillard enveloppa St. Mary Mead, et dès le mardi matin, Miss Jane Marple ne pouvait plus apercevoir les lilas depuis la fenêtre de son salon. Elle s'était levée tôt, comme à son habitude, et se tenait à la fenêtre, vêtue de son vieux manteau gris, observant le blanc se plaquer contre les carreaux. Au loin, un camion de laitier siffla doucement sur le chemin, et le chien du forgeron aboya une fois, hésitant, avant de se raviser. Le village semblait flou et incertain à ses contours, comme si l'on avait passé un chiffon humide sur une aquarelle. C'était, pensa Miss Marple, un temps à accident, un temps aussi à choses qu'on aurait préféré ne pas voir. Elle ouvrit un peu plus les rideaux et s'apprêtait à se détourner lorsqu'elle entendit, très distinctement, un cri de femme. Le bruit venait du cimetière, ténu et bref, comme coupé net par une main ou un souffle retenu, et il fut aussitôt suivi du silence absolu que le brouillard impose dans un lieu exigu. Miss Marple serra le rideau. Elle attendit. Une porte s'ouvrit au bout de la ruelle, puis se referma. Une sonnette de vélo tinta 2 fois, d'un ton vif et désorienté. Puis plus rien. Elle s'habilla rapidement mais avec soin, la jupe bleu marine, le cardigan lavande, la petite broche que son neveu Raymond lui avait jadis achetée chez Aspreys dans un accès de frénésie littéraire, et elle nouait les rubans de son chapeau lorsqu'on frappa de façon urgente à sa porte d'entrée. C'était Cherry haletant de son manteau mal boutonné. « Mademoiselle Marple, madame, oh madame, on a retrouvé madame Allorand dans le cimetière, près du porche sud. Morte, madame. Le docteur Haydock est là, ainsi que le gendarme, et ils disent que sa gorge... Oh madame, je ne le dirai pas, je ne le dirai pas. » « Ma chère, dit doucement Miss Marple, asseyez-vous un instant. La bouilloire est prête. Vous aurez une tasse avant que nous fassions quoi que ce soit. » Mais Cherry refusait de s'asseoir. Cherry était, à sa manière, splendide en temps de crise. Elle vibrait. Il y avait quelqu'un, madame, dans le brouillard. Il revenait du premier train et il a aperçu un homme, une silhouette. Vous savez, madame, penché sur elle près du porche. Il a crié et la silhouette s'est enfuie. Monsieur Pettigrew l'a poursuivi. Mais son genou, vous savez comment il est. Et quand il est revenu, elle était. Oui, dit Miss Marple. Oui, je vois bien. Apportez-moi mon parapluie, chérie. Nous ferions mieux d'y aller. Le chemin menant à l'église ne faisait guère plus de 200 mètres. Et par une matinée claire, on pouvait apercevoir le porche depuis la porte de Miss Marple, les édifs formant un cadre sombre et net au-delà. Ce matin-là, on ne distinguait que la haie humide juste devant soi, les pavés qui luisaient sous les pas et la faible traînée jaune où la lanterne du gendarme flottait au loin. Miss Marple marchait prudemment, la main dans le coude de Cherry, et elle parlait peu, mais elle écoutait. Le brouillard rendait chaque son étrangement précis, le goutte-à-goutte de l'eau du toit du porche, la voix du docteur Haydock, basse et sèche. Une femme qui pleurait, c'était forcément Madame Pettigrew, qui avait bon cœur et une fâcheuse tendance à se rendre aux catastrophes, coiffée de son filet à cheveux. Et, par-dessus tout cela, le doux et persistant tintement de quelqu'un qui essaie, en vain, de sonner correctement la cloche de l'église. Une seule note irrégulière, puis une pause, puis la même note à nouveau, comme si la corde avait été tirée par une main qui ne savait pas vraiment ce qu'elle faisait. Miss Marple remarqua la clochette. Elle la classa dans son dossier. Madame Halloran était étendue juste sous le porche sud, à moitié sur les dalles usées, à moitié sur le chemin de gravier. Son beau manteau noir était déployé et son chapeau, un chapeau respectable orné d'une plume de faisan, était tombé à 1 mètre de sa tête. Elle avait été la gouvernante du vicaire pendant 11 ans. Une veuve corpulente au visage rose, aux opinions bien arrêtées sur le polissage du laiton et tout aussi tranchée sur les affaires d'autrui. La plume de faisan était trempée. Une tache sombre barrait sa gorge, que Miss Marple n'examina pas longtemps, et un mince filet de sang avait coulé sur la dentelle de son col et y avait séché. Le docteur Haydock se redressa à l'approche de Miss Marple. « Jane, dit-il, et cette simple syllabe eut plus d'impact que la plupart des discours masculins. « Combien de temps, docteur ? 1 heure. Moins, peut-être. Le corps n'est pas froid. » Il jeta un coup d'œil au gendarme, un très jeune homme aux oreilles roses, et baissa la voix. Étranglé, par ligature avec quelque chose de fin, peut-être du fil de fer ou une corde solide, pas avec les mains. Celui qui a fait ça se tenait derrière elle et a tiré de toutes ses forces. Elle n'a pas eu le temps de crier longtemps. Elle a crié, dit Miss Marple. Je l'ai entendu, de ma fenêtre. Un petit cri interrompu net. Et ça a été fait rapidement, et avec habileté, dit Miss Marple. Son regard ne portait pas sur Madame Halloran, mais sur le porche lui-même, sur le porte-parapluie à l'intérieur, où un parapluie noir sec était appuyé contre le mur, sur le livre d'or ouvert à une page blanche, sur son petit support, sur la corde de la sonnette qui pendait du trou percé dans le plafond du porche, oscillant légèrement malgré l'absence totale de vent. Le brouillard s'insinuait sous l'arche ouverte du porche comme un voisin curieux. « Pettigrew l'a vu », dit le gendarme, impatient et hésitant. « Pettigrew a vu le meurtrier lui-même, mademoiselle. Pardonnez-moi, mademoiselle Marple, et nous aurons une description immédiate. L'inspecteur est. »« Oui, ma chère, » dit Miss Marple. « Je pense que oui. Dites-moi, lui a-t-on pris quelque chose ?» Le gendarme cligna des yeux. « Son sac à main, madame, était sur le chemin, ouvert. Il était vide, madame, c'est-à-dire qu'il contenait un mouchoir, une clé et un paquet de bonbons à la menthe. Pas d'argent. Il n'y avait peut-être rien à prendre. »« Peut-être, » dit Miss Marple, qui savait depuis 11 ans que Madame Halloran avait toujours sur elle de l'argent liquide pour le ménage le mardi matin. Elle recula du perron. La cloche sonna une dernière fois au-dessus d'elle, cette note unique et incertaine, puis s'arrêta. Elle leva le menton et tendit l'oreille, et bientôt une petite silhouette rondelette en soutane surgit à travers le brouillard venant de la porte de la sacristie, le visage empreint de détresse. « Miss Marple !»« Oh ! Oh ! Miss Marple !»« Ils me l'ont dit. Je ne peux pas. J'étais seul à la première messe. Il n'y avait pas de communion. Il y avait du brouillard. Et quand je suis entré dans la sacristie pour ranger les vases sacrés, je n'ai rien entendu, je vous assure, rien du tout. Et la cloche. La cloche. J'ai essayé de la sonner, je pensais appeler. Je ne crois pas que je la sonne correctement. Vous ne l'êtes pas, monsieur Loomis, dit Miss Marple avec beaucoup de gentillesse. Mais cela ne veut rien dire. Rentrez à l'abri de l'humidité. Le docteur Haydock vous parlera dans un instant. Le vicaire, un nouveau venu, à peine 6 mois à St. Mary Mead, très jeune pour cette charge et très nerveux face à sa gouvernante, porta un mouchoir humide à sa bouche et se laissa conduire à l'intérieur. En passant devant Miss Marple, elle remarqua que sa soutane était trempée jusqu'aux genoux, qu'il s'était coupé en se rasant et que la coupure saignait encore légèrement, et qu'il portait à la main gauche une moufle de laine noire comme on en achète au marché paroissieux, tandis que sa main droite était nue. Il n'avait pas l'air, pensa-t-elle, d'un homme qui avait étranglé quelqu'un. Il ressemblait plutôt à un homme à qui l'on avait demandé de lire à haute voix un passage difficile de grec devant son évêque. « Pauvre monsieur Loomis, murmura Cherry. Il ne s'en remettra jamais. Elle était si stricte avec lui, madame. Elle ne le laissait même pas beurrer ses propres tartines. »« Non, dit Miss Marple, elle ne le ferait pas. » Le vieux Hems. Pettigrew surgit alors du brouillard, l'inspecteur Slack de Mouch Benham à ses côtés. Miss Marple l'avait déjà rencontrée et il la considérait comme une sorte d'horloge décorative, inoffensive, lente et susceptible de sonner à des moments inopportuns. Il lui fit un signe de tête sans chaleur. « Miss Marple, mauvaise affaire. Nous aurons l'affaire en main aujourd'hui, je pense. Monsieur Pettigrew va nous décrire l'homme qu'il a vu. Maintenant, monsieur, si vous le voulez bien. » Pettigrew, âgé de 81 ans et fier de ses yeux, se redressa. Un homme de grande taille, inspecteur. Un homme grand et mince, vêtu d'un long manteau, sombre, peut-être noir, peut-être bleu très foncé, et d'un chapeau mou rabattu sur la tête. Il était penché sur elle. Quand je l'ai appelé, il s'est redressé, notez-le bien, comme le fait un homme de grande taille. et il a couru par là, vers le porche. Mon genou, oui, mon genou, mais j'en ai vu assez, inspecteur. Un homme grand et mince, vêtu d'un long manteau. Je devrais le reconnaître. L'inspecteur Slack prenait des notes avec satisfaction. Un homme grand et mince, vêtu d'un long manteau. Excellent, monsieur Pettigrew, excellent. Maintenant, y avait-il quelque chose à dire sur sa démarche? Ses mains? N'importe quoi. Il se déplaçait, a déclaré monsieur Pettigrew, comme un homme qui connaissait le chemin. Un petit silence s'installa. A dit Slack, comme un homme qui connaissait le chemin, a déclaré monsieur Pettigrew qui n'aimait pas qu'on le surpasse. Miss Marple, légèrement en retrait, observait la corde de la sonnette à travers l'arche du porche. Elle avait cessé de se balancer. Elle repensait au cri qu'elle avait entendu à sa fenêtre. Un cri ténu, bref, ordinaire, de ceux qu'on pousse lorsqu'on est surpris par quelque chose de désagréable. Pas, pensa-t-elle, le cri d'une femme qu'on étrangle par un fil de fer. Ce cri-là était arrivé trop tôt, ou peut-être trop tard, pour la forme déformée que M. Pettigrew avait aperçue. Elle n'en fit pas mention. L'inspecteur Slack n'avait aucune patience pour le timing des cris. Elle a répondu, « Inspecteur, cela vous dérangerait-il beaucoup si je passais au presbytère cet après-midi? Je pense que M. Loomis aura besoin d'un peu de compagnie. » Et Madame Halloran s'occupait aimablement de quelques affaires paroissiales pour moi. « Veuillez le faire, Miss Marple, veuillez le faire, » dit Slack, qui n'aurait pas objecté si elle avait proposé d'invoquer la lune. Tout pour calmer le vicaire. Le pauvre jeune homme a l'air d'avoir été défiguré. « Oui, » dit Miss Marple. C'est tout à fait le cas. Elle rentra chez elle à travers le brouillard, Cherry au bras, et ne parla plus jusqu'à ce qu'elles aient franchi le seuil. Puis elle dit, « Cherry, ma chérie, pourrais-tu remettre la bouilloire en marche? Ensuite, j'aimerais que tu me racontes tout ce que tu sais sur Madame Halloran et le nouveau vicaire. Absolument tout, ma chérie. Même les passages qu'on t'a interdit de répéter. Surtout ceux-là. » Les yeux de Cherry s'illuminèrent malgré elle. Il n'y a personne au monde à qui l'on confie les ragots du village avec autant de confiance qu'à Miss Marple, qui semble simplement tricoter un bas alors qu'en réalité elle est en train de dessiner une carte. La bouilloire siffla. Le brouillard s'infiltrait par la fenêtre. Au bout du chemin, la cloche de l'église sonna une fois, pour de bon cette fois, l'inspecteur Slack, sans doute, ayant remis le malheureux vicaire à sa place, puis se tut. Miss Marple, immobile dans son fauteuil, son bas sur les genoux, écouta, se souvint, et commença, dans le calme de ses pensées, à avoir peur. Car il y avait quelque chose d'étrange dans ce cri. Et il y avait quelque chose d'étrange dans la cloche. Et il y avait aussi quelque chose d'étrange chez le grand homme maigre de M. Pettigrew, même si elle ne pouvait pas, pour le moment, dire quoi. À l'heure du thé, tout le village était au courant. À l'heure du thé, le village avait déjà désigné sans hésitation son meurtrier. Car rien n'apaise mieux la conscience humaine que l'identification rapide du coupable d'autrui. Et le coupable désigné était M. Daniel Garrick, fermier à Marsh End, aperçu 4 nuits auparavant en train de crier sur Madame Halloran dans le chemin devant la poste. Madame Pettigrew le tenait de sa sœur. Sa sœur le tenait de la cuisinière de Madame Bantry. La cuisinière de Madame Bantry le tenait du laitier de Garrick, qui était présent et avait entendu de ses propres oreilles Garrick dire « Je te verrai d'abord en enfer, vieille sorcière, et c'est promis. » Cela se répéta à la poste, dans la ruelle, chez le boucher, à la bibliothèque de près, et surtout dans le propre salon de Miss Marple, où, à 4 heures, elle avait reçu successivement Madame Bantry, grande, gentille et indignée, Mademoiselle Weatherby, mince, gentille et effrayée, et le docteur Haydock, venu prendre le thé et resté pour boire du whisky. « Bien sûr que c'est Garrick, » dit Madame Bantry en retirant ses gants avec énergie. « C'est le seul à St. Mary Mead à avoir le tempérament pour ça. Et puis, il y a la taille. Pettigrew a bien précisé grand. Garrick mesure 1,88 mam. Et le manteau, Garrick porte toujours son grand manteau noir par tous les temps, même quand il fait moins de 10 degrés. Qu'est-ce que Madame Halloran lui avait fait? Demanda Miss Marple en versant le verre. Madame Bantry se rassit. Ah, voyons, c'est là qu'il faut faire attention, Jane, car c'est une affaire très douloureuse. Vous vous souvenez du garçon Garrick, Tom? 16 ans, très calme, très studieux. Eh bien, l'été dernier, il y a eu un incident. Pas un incident au sens le plus grave du terme, vous comprenez, mais un incident, et Madame Halloran l'a découvert. Or, Madame Halloran n'était pas du genre à garder ce genre de choses pour elle. Elle l'a dit au vicaire. Naturellement, c'était Monsieur Trelfall, bien sûr, avant son décès, avant que nous n'ayons le pauvre petit Loomis à charge. Et Monsieur Trelfall a géré la situation avec beaucoup de bienveillance. Mais le garçon a été envoyé chez un cousin dans le Yorkshire, et on a parlé de la police. Garrick ne lui a pas pardonné. Il la tient pour responsable, enfin il l'a dit publiquement qu'elle a détruit son fils par pure méchanceté. Est-ce juste? Je ne me prononce pas. Mais il l'a dit. Et il y a 4 nuits, il l'a répété dans le chemin, d'une voix qui portait jusqu'à Much Benham. Je vois, dit Miss Marple. Et le garçon était en fait? Oh, qui sait, Jane, qui sait? Ces choses sont rarement aussi noires ou aussi blanches que le village le prétend. Mais l'important, c'est le grief du père. Le père a un grief qui pourrait faire l'objet d'un manteau. Un long manteau noir, dit le docteur Haydock d'un ton sec. Miss Marple ne sourit pas. Elle pensait à Daniel Garrick, qu'elle connaissait depuis toujours. Un homme grand, lent et honnête, du genre à porter des agneaux blessés dans ses bras et à s'attendrir devant les canards. Il était capable de crier dans une ruelle. Elle ne l'imaginait pas capable de se cacher derrière une femme dans le brouillard et de lui passer un fil de fer sous la gorge. Mais après tout, on est capable de presque tout si on appuie assez fort sur le bon point sensible. Et le fils unique d'un homme était assurément un point sensible. Elle a dit, « Est-ce que quelqu'un d'autre n'aimait pas Madame Halloran ?» Madame Bantry et Mademoiselle Weatherby se regardèrent puis regardèrent le tapis. « Eh bien, dit Mademoiselle Weatherby, il y a le pauvre Monsieur Loomis, bien sûr. Elle l'a terriblement maltraité. Mais on ne tue pas sa gouvernante pour cela, n'est-ce pas? On la congédie, tout simplement. On ne peut pas, dit Madame Bantry, donner congé à une gouvernante qui est venue avec les vivants. Et voici Mademoiselle Eustache, dit Mademoiselle Weatherby à contre-cœur. Ah, dit Madame Bantry. Oui, Frances. Les aiguilles de Miss Marple ne s'arrêtèrent pas. Frances Eustace, la nièce du vicaire, sa cousine, je crois, techniquement parlant. Une cousine, enfin une cousine. Elle est arrivée au printemps, comme vous le savez, pour tenir la maison le temps qu'il s'installe, et puis elle est restée parce qu'elle n'avait nulle part où aller. Une veuve, très jeune pour être veuve. Son mari est mort en mer, paraît-il, même si, dans ce genre de situation, on peut se demander si mort est toujours le terme approprié. Madame Bantry fit une petite grimace. Elle et Madame Halloran ne s'appréciaient pas vraiment. En effet, Madame Halloran avait l'impression que Frances empiétait sur son territoire, qu'elle essayait de s'approprier les moindres détails, les fleurs, les contes, le choix des hymnes. Madame Halloran régnait sur le presbytère depuis 11 ans. Elle n'avait pas l'intention d'être détrônée par une cousine en deuil, aussi discrète fût-elle. « Frances est une créature discrète, dit Mademoiselle Weatherby. Très pâle, très immobile. Le genre de personne qu'on oublie dans la pièce. Elle s'habille en noir, bien sûr. Toujours en noir. Toujours noir, répéta Miss Marple vivement, et ses aiguilles continuèrent leur travail sans elle. Elle repensa aux femmes qu'elle avait connues au cours de sa longue vie, toujours vêtues de noir, celles véritablement endeuillées qui finissaient par s'enlacer et glisser un ruban gris à leurs poignets, et les autres, celles pour qui le noir n'était pas le deuil, mais un uniforme, un étendard de repli sur soi, derrière lequel on pouvait être observé sans jamais être vraiment vu. Il y avait eu, dans sa jeunesse, une jeune fille, Nellie Carstairs, la nièce du pharmacien, qui avait porté le deuil d'un mari que personne n'avait jamais rencontré, et qui avait discrètement et précisément empoisonné une tante pour 370 livres. Miss Marple ne pensait pas que Frances Eustace ait nécessairement empoisonné qui que ce soit. Elle pensait simplement qu'il fallait se méfier face à une femme vêtue de noir de façon habituelle et à la voix douce de ce qu'on appelait une créature discrète. « A-t-elle de l'argent » demanda Miss Marple. « Pas un sou, ma chère, c'est bien là le problème. Elle est venue parce qu'elle n'avait nulle part où aller. Son mari l'a laissée enfin, avec des dettes, à ce qu'il paraît, et pas grand-chose d'autre. Le vicaire les a discrètement réglées, paraît-il. De sa propre poche, la pauvre, avec son salaire. Et qu'a-t-elle à gagner de la mort de Madame Halloran ?» Un petit silence s'installa. « Eh bien, dit lentement Madame Bantry, je suppose qu'elle devient la maîtresse du presbytère, en fait. »« En effet, dit Miss Marple. »« Oui, en effet, c'est le cas. » Le docteur Haydock, qui était resté silencieux, posa son verre. « Jane, vous ne pensez pas sérieusement ?»« Je ne pense à rien pour l'instant, docteur. J'écoute seulement, vous savez, comme tout le monde. Dites-moi à quelle heure avez-vous dit que Madame Halloran était décédée ? » « Entre 7h15 et 8h. pas plus tard. Et la messe matinale, c'était à 7 ans. Monsieur Loomis était-il seul à l'hôtel? C'est ce qu'il dit. Il n'y avait pas de communion. Le brouillard les a tenus à distance. Et mademoiselle Eustache? J'étais, je crois, au presbytère en train de préparer le petit déjeuner. Vous croyez? C'est ce qu'on m'a dit. Par qui? Par monsieur Loomis, qu'il avait reçu de mademoiselle Eustache. Ah, dit Miss Marple. Oui, tout à fait. Le brouillard s'épaissit à l'approche du soir, et le village sombra dans ce silence si particulier au lieu frappé par la mort. Les lampes s'allumèrent tôt. Les portes se fermèrent plus tôt que d'habitude. Madame Pettigrew fut découverte par son mari assise dans la cuisine, un tisonnier sur les genoux, sans trop savoir ce qu'elle comptait en faire. Elle dit se sentir plus à l'aise ainsi. Miss Marple, après avoir raccompagné son dernier invité, enfila ses chaussures les plus robustes et son imperméable le plus épais, puis remonta très lentement le chemin jusqu'au presbytère. Le presbytère se dressait derrière un muret de pierre moussue, orné de lauriers et d'un if solitaire. La faible lueur jaune de la fenêtre du bureau était la seule tache de chaleur dans ce monde blanc. Miss Marple sonna. Un instant plus tard, la porte s'ouvrit, non pas à cause de Madame Halloran, qui ne l'ouvrirait plus jamais, mais à cause d'une silhouette frêle vêtue de noir, de la tête aux pieds, dont le visage, éclairé par la lumière du gaz, était aussi lisse et impassible qu'une feuille de papier. « Mademoiselle Marple !» dit Frances Eustace d'une voix si basse qu'elle ne troublait presque pas l'air. « Quelle gentillesse ! Entrez donc, mon cousin sera ravi. Il est très inquiet. »« Ma chère Madame Eustache !» dit Miss Marple en entrant dans le hall. « Quelle journée épouvantable pour vous tous !»«
Ah !»
« Oui, dit Frances Eustace. « Terrible. Voulez-vous bien aller voir ? Il est dans le bureau. » Elle s'avança légère et silencieuse sur le tapis et Miss Marple la suivit. En quelques secondes, elle aperçut 3 choses. Le porte-parapluie près de la porte contenait 2 parapluies, tous 2 parfaitement secs. Sur la table d'appoint reposait une petite carte à bordure noire, à moitié écrite d'une belle écriture claire, à la sœur de Madame Halloran. Avec toutes nos condoléances pour ce décès soudain et bouleversant. Et la phrase s'arrêtait là, au milieu, comme si l'auteur avait été interrompu et allait bientôt revenir la terminer. L'encre était encore fraîche. Enfin, sur le porte-manteau soigneusement sur le long par-dessus sombre de Monsieur Loomis et un tablier d'enfant qui devait avoir appartenu à une famille paroissiale disparue depuis longtemps. Un manteau noir de femme, 3/4, dont l'ourlet était humide. « Quel brouillard !» murmura Miss Marple. « On a bien du mal à garder son ourlet au sec, n'est-ce pas ?»« Non, répondit Frances Eustace, à peine. Le vicaire était dans son bureau. Il était assis à son bureau, les yeux fixés sur une Bible fermée, et il se leva avec un soulagement presque gênant à voir. « Miss Marple, oh vous êtes formidable. Je ne sais pas quoi faire. On a téléphoné à l'évêque. La sœur de Madame Halloran doit arriver de Reading demain. Frances a été si gentille. Frances a été un véritable pilier. Je ne sais pas comment je ferais sans elle. »« Vous vous en sortiriez, mon cher monsieur Loomis, dit Miss Marple d'un ton vif en s'asseyant. On y arrive toujours. Oh non, je ne crois pas que je devrais. Je ne suis pas un homme fort, mademoiselle Marple. Je le sais, je l'ai toujours su. Madame Halloran le savait aussi. Elle disait toujours, il déglutit. Elle disait toujours beaucoup de choses. Elle était très dévouée à la paroisse. Elle y a consacré 11 ans. Oui, dit Miss Marple. Elle l'a fait. Il y eut un silence. Frances Eustace se tenait près de la fenêtre, les mains croisées sur les hanches, telle une petite cariatide noire. Elle ne disait rien. Miss Marple remarqua qu'elle ne semblait même pas écouter. Elle paraissait ailleurs, absorbée par quelque calcul intérieur sans rapport avec la pièce où elle se trouvait. « Monsieur Loomis, dit doucement Miss Marple, je ne veux pas vous contrarier. Mais je dois vous demander, vous êtes sorti de la sacristie, je crois, après la fin de l'office. Êtes-vous allé directement au porche sud ? Non, dit Monsieur Loomis. Non, je suis allé à la cloche. Je pensais que je devais la sonner. Le brouillard était si épais, je me suis dit, je pensais que cela aiderait ceux qui étaient perdus. Voyez-vous, je suis un peu nerveux à l'idée de sonner cette cloche. Monsieur Trelfall la sonnait toujours lui-même. Je suis allé la sonner, et je l'ai mal sonnée, et puis j'ai entendu des voix dehors, et le gendarme était là, et puis j'ai vu. Et avant le début de l'office, vous étiez dans la sacristie ? Dès 6h30, j'arrive toujours tôt. J'aime me recueillir, j'étais là depuis 6h30. la porte intérieure de la sacristie verrouillée, comme on le fait lorsqu'on est seul dans l'église. Et pendant l'office, j'ai sonné la petite cloche au moment de la consécration. J'ai attendu le temps habituel. Il n'y avait pas de communion, j'ai purifié les vases sacrés, je me suis ôté de ma robe, je suis sorti. Et pendant tout ce temps, dit Miss Marple, de 6h30 jusqu'à, 25h moins le quart, à propos de ça. Pendant tout ce temps, vous n'avez vu personne. Vous n'avez entendu personne. J'ai entendu, dit M. Loomis avec une précision douloureuse, la porte de l'église s'ouvrir et se refermer une fois. Vers 7h15, je crois. J'ai supposé qu'un fidèle retardataire, voyant que l'office touchait à sa fin, était parti. Je ne me suis pas levé pour regarder. Le brouillard, vous savez. Et une fois, dit Miss Marple, ouvrez et fermez une fois, oui. Pas deux fois, non. Monsieur Loomis, Madame Halloran assistait-elle habituellement à l'office matinal du mardi? Toujours, Miss Marple. Elle venait ensuite avec mon plateau de café, c'est-à-dire qu'elle le préparait dans la sacristie avant l'office, et ensuite nous prenions le petit déjeuner ensemble dans la salle à manger. Elle le fait depuis 11 ans avec Monsieur Trelfall et avec moi depuis 6 mois. Et ce matin? Ce matin, dit Monsieur Loomis, elle n'est pas venue à l'église. J'ai supposé qu'elle avait été retardée par une affaire paroissiale et qu'elle me rejoindrait au petit déjeuner. Sa voix se brisa légèrement. Je ne sais pas ce qu'elle faisait sur le porche. Je ne sais absolument pas ce qui l'a amenée dehors. Je ne comprends pas. Je n'y arrive pas. Miss Marple ne regardait pas Monsieur Loomis, mais Frances Eustace près de la fenêtre. Frances Eustace n'avait pas bougé. Ses mains étaient toujours jointes. Son visage était parfaitement impassible. Et tandis que Miss Marple l'observait, très doucement, presque imperceptiblement, le coin des lèvres de Madame Eustace se souleva, comme au souvenir d'une petite satisfaction intime. Puis elle resta immobile. C'était, pensa Miss Marple, le sourire d'une femme qui avait appris une nouvelle qu'elle attendait. Non pas qu'elle savourait, mais qu'elle attendait. « Madame Eustace, dit-elle, excusez-moi, pourrais-je vous demander un verre d'eau ?» Je suis désorienté dans le brouillard, il m'étreint la poitrine. « Bien sûr, » répondit Frances Eustace, et elle sortit. Une fois la porte refermée, Miss Marple se pencha légèrement en avant. « Monsieur Loomis, puis-je vous poser une question, en toute confidentialité? Vous n'êtes pas obligé de répondre si vous préférez ne pas le faire. »« Oui, bien sûr, Miss Marple. Madame Halloran vous a-t-elle récemment confié quelque chose au sujet de votre cousine, Madame Eustace, qui vous a... » Inquiété. Monsieur Loomis devint aussi pâle que sa surplis. Il regarda la porte, puis ses mains, puis le tapis, et enfin, avec un profond regret, Miss Marple. Elle s'était forgé certaines opinions. Sur Frances, sur son passé. Elle croyait, du moins, elle l'avait entendu d'une cousine qui habite près de Portsmouth, que le mari de Frances n'était pas mort en mer de la manière dont on l'avait généralement supposé. Elle croyait qu'il était mort dans des circonstances qui avaient fait l'objet d'une enquête. Par la police. Par le coroner, Miss Marple. Uniquement par le coroner. Et le verdict était accident. J'ai vu les documents moi-même, Frances me les a montrés. Enfin, Madame Halloran a insisté pour que je les voie, et Frances me les a présentés. Et Madame Halloran n'était pas satisfaite. Madame Halloran n'était pas facilement satisfaite. Elle avait parlé d'écrire à sa cousine à Portsmouth pour obtenir plus de détails. Elle en avait encore parlé dimanche dernier. « Pas plus tard que dimanche », répéta Miss Marple. La porte s'ouvrit. Frances Eustace revint avec le verre d'eau sur un petit plateau d'argent, et son visage était aussi lisse qu'auparavant. « Quelle gentillesse, ma chère, » dit Miss Marple. « Merci. Monsieur Loomis et moi parlions justement du dévouement de Madame Halloran à la comptabilité paroissiale. »« Quelle perte !» fit écho Frances Eustace, et Miss Marple but son eau et prit congé. Elle rentra chez elle à pied, très lentement, dans le brouillard. Elle repensa à la carte de condoléances à moitié écrite sur la table d'appoint, à l'encre encore fraîche, à la main d'une assurance parfaite. Elle repensa au manteau humide suspendu au porte-manteau, aux 2 parapluies secs et au presbytère dont la maîtresse avait été assassinée moins d'1 heure et demie auparavant. Elle repensa au petit sourire discret de Frances Eustace, mais elle pensa aussi à Daniel Garrick, à son grand manteau noir, à son fils unique exilé dans le Yorkshire, et à sa voix qui portait jusqu'à mi-chemin de Much Benham, disant « On se reverra en enfer d'abord ». Elle pensa à l'homme grand et mince de M. Pettigrew, dans son long manteau, se déplaçant avec l'assurance d'un homme qui connaissait le chemin. Frances Eustace n'était pas grand. Frances Eustace était une silhouette petite, frêle et errante. M. Pettigrew avait été très clair sur ce point. Lorsqu'elle atteignit son portail, Miss Marple commença, malgré elle, à croire que Daniel Garrick avait tué Madame Halloran dans le brouillard. Cela collait. Cela collait trop bien pour ne pas coller. Le grief, la hauteur, le manteau, la voix forte entendue dans le chemin 4 nuits auparavant. Le fait qu'elle n'avait pas mentionné à Madame Bantry que Marsh End se trouvait de l'autre côté du cimetière et que n'importe quel homme revenant de son pâturage au petit matin traversait le chemin de l'église aussi naturellement que de respirer. Cela ne lui plaisait pas. Mais elle savait depuis longtemps que les goûts personnels n'avaient aucune importance en de telles matières. Elle rentra à l'intérieur, prit un petit repas composé de pain et de fromage, et dormit mal. Les 2 jours suivants furent consacrés à l'inspecteur Slack, qui s'attela à la reconstitution la plus publique possible de la matinée du décès de Madame Halloran. Il mesura le porche. Il fit parcourir le chemin à M. Pettigrew en temps réel. Avec l'air d'un magicien, il sortit un morceau de cordelette bleu foncé torsadé de la remise à outils de Daniel Garrick à Marsh End. Garrick lui-même admit que cette cordelette lui appartenait, mais il ne put en justifier la provenance, car il l'avait utilisée la veille après-midi pour attacher un morceau de clôture et ne retrouvait plus l'endroit où il l'avait laissé. Il présenta également le grand manteau noir de Garrick, avec une déchirure récente à l'ourlet. Garrick affirma l'avoir faite sur une ronce, tandis que Slack suggéra que cela aurait tout aussi bien pu être fait sur un if. Il fit venir un témoin, un garçon à vélo, qui avait vu Garrick sur le chemin à 7h05 ce matin-là, bien plus près de l'église que de Marsh End. Garrick déclara qu'il marchait. Il marchait parce qu'il n'arrivait pas à dormir. Il marchait parce que l'anniversaire de son fils était tombé la semaine précédente, que son fils était dans le Yorkshire, que sa femme avait pleuré dimanche et qu'il avait besoin de prendre l'air. Bref, il n'avait pas un alibi qui vaille un sou. L'inspecteur Slack arrêta Daniel Garrick jeudi matin, dans la ruelle devant la poste, avec une solennité qui laissait supposer qu'il s'y était préparé pendant des heures. Garrick se laissa faire sans résistance. Il ressemblait, pensa Miss Marple, qui observait la scène depuis sa fenêtre, à un homme qui avait toujours craint le pire et qui était presque soulagé de voir enfin ce qu'il avait semé et mis un nom. Le village était satisfait. Il était même presque joyeux. On ne pleurait pas vraiment Madame Halloran. Trop d'années d'opinion bien arrêtées avaient joué contre elle, et le meurtrier était un homme que personne n'avait jamais vraiment apprécié, grand, taciturne et sujet à des accès de colère. Justice avait été rendue. Le brouillard se dissipa vendredi matin. Les haies fumaient sous un soleil ténu. Monsieur Loomis annonça une cérémonie commémorative pour mardi. Madame Bantry commanda de nouveaux gants. Miss Marple n'éprouvait pas une telle satisfaction. Elle ressentait en réalité un malaise croissant et très désagréable, qu'elle ne parvenait pas à identifier tout de suite, et qu'elle ne prit conscience que le samedi après-midi, alors qu'elle taillait ses marguerites de la Saint-Michel. Elle se redressa brusquement en poussant un petit cri involontaire, et Chérie accourut. « Madame, vous êtes malade ?»« Non, chérie. »« Non, seulement. J'ai été très bête. Chérie, mets la bouilloire en marche s'il te plaît, et envoie un mot au docteur Haydock pour lui demander s'il pourrait passer en rentrant de sa consultation du soir. J'aimerais lui demander quelque chose. »« Oui, madame. »« À propos de l'affaire, madame ? À propos de l'affaire. » La bouilloire siffla pour la 2e fois de la semaine. Miss Marple s'assit avec son bas et tenta de se ressaisir. Ce qui lui était revenu à l'esprit, soudain, par-dessus les marguerites, c'était le témoignage de M. Pettigrew. M. Pettigrew avait dit que l'homme s'était déplacé comme quelqu'un qui connaissait le chemin. L'inspecteur Slack avait conclu qu'il s'agissait d'un villageois. Or, Daniel Garrick était un fermier qui venait de Marsh End par le chemin. Il ne traversait généralement pas le cimetière. Il n'en avait pas besoin. Le chemin qui traversait le cimetière était emprunté par les paroissiens venant des chaumières de l'autre côté, ainsi que par le vicaire, par Madame Halloran et par tous ceux qui habitaient le presbytère. Un homme qui connaissait le chemin. Un homme qui savait, en fait, exactement où pendait la corde de la cloche, exactement où la marche du porche s'élevait d'un demi-pouce de façon inattendue. et exactement où l'allée d'If faisait un virage serré autour du portillon. Daniel Garrick n'était au courant de rien. Elle avait presque fini de le noter pour le remettre au docteur Haydock lorsqu'on frappa doucement et sans hâte à sa porte. Et sur le seuil, vêtu de noir sans la moindre nuance, tenant un petit bouquet de roses tardives noué d'un ruban noir, se tenait Frances Eustace. « Mademoiselle Marple, dit-elle, je vous prie de m'excuser de vous déranger sans prévenir. Mon cousin m'a demandé de vous apporter ces fleurs du jardin du presbytère. Il a beaucoup apprécié votre visite de mardi. » « Quelle gentillesse de sa part! Quelle gentillesse de votre part! Entrez donc, ma chère. » Frances Eustace entra. Elle s'assit sur la chaise que Miss Marple lui offrit, déposa les roses sur la table à côté d'elle et croisa les mains sur sa taille, exactement comme elle l'avait fait au presbytère. « Je ne vous retiendrai pas longtemps, » dit-elle. « Seulement, je voulais vous remercier, Miss Marple, pour votre bienveillance envers mon cousin. Je ne crois pas que vous puissiez imaginer à quel point il est mal préparé à ce qui lui est arrivé. Il était vicaire dans une petite paroisse du Suffolk avant de venir ici, avec seulement 23 âmes à charge. Cette cure est bien trop lourde pour lui. Il n'aurait pas dû l'accepter. Il l'a acceptée parce que son ancien précepteur l'y a contraint. Et maintenant, voilà ce qui est arrivé. Cela doit être un fardeau très lourd. C'est vrai. Il ne veut pas dormir. Il sursaute au moindre bruit. Il pleure, oui, il pleure, Miss Marple, comme un enfant quand la cloche sonne. Je ne sais pas comment je vais faire pour qu'il garde son calme pendant toute l'enquête. Je vois que vous lui êtes dévoué. Frances Eustace fixa brièvement Miss Marple. Ses yeux d'un gris très pâle étaient parfaitement fixes. Il est le seul parent vivant qui m'ait jamais témoigné de la bonté, Miss Marple. Je le protégerai de toutes mes forces. J'espère que vous le comprendrez. Je comprends parfaitement, dit Miss Marple. Parfaitement. Il y eut un court silence. L'horloge sur la cheminée fit tic-tac. De la cuisine parvint le bruit familier de Cherry qui s'affairait bruyamment avec une bouilloire. « Monsieur Garrick, » dit Frances Eustace à voix basse. « Le pauvre Monsieur Garrick. On dit que c'est lui, c'est certain. On dit que le cordon lui appartenait, ainsi que le manteau, et que le garçon à vélo l'a vu. Est-ce ce que vous comprenez aussi, mademoiselle Marple? Vous qui connaissiez tellement mieux madame Allorand que moi, c'était magnifiquement exécuté. Presque parfait. » La petite hésitation, l'appel à la connaissance du terrain supérieur de Miss Marple, l'insinuation qu'on était, après tout, qu'un étranger posant une question. Miss Marple, qui avait vu tant de gens feindre l'innocence au cours de sa longue vie, ne sourit pas. « Je pense, » dit-elle prudemment, que les preuves contre Monsieur Garrick sont solides. Oui. Je pense que l'inspecteur Slack est convaincu d'avoir trouvé le coupable. Et toi? Ma chère Madame Eustache, je suis une vieille femme qui tricote des bas. Mon avis n'a aucune valeur. Je ne le crois pas, Miss Marple. Tout le village dit, du moins, c'est ce qu'on m'a dit, que vous avez un don exceptionnel pour cerner les caractères humains. Les habitants du village sont très gentils. Un léger sourire discret effleura les lèvres de Frances Eustace avant de disparaître. Elle se leva. « Je vous ai assez retenu. » Ma chère, avant votre départ, Miss Marple se leva elle aussi, prenant cet air vaguement contrit qui précédait si souvent ses observations les plus justes. « Excusez la curiosité d'une vieille femme. Monsieur Loomis m'a dit, peut-être n'aurait-il pas dû, mais il l'a fait, que Madame Allorand avait mené certaines enquêtes sur les circonstances du décès de votre mari. Je suis navré de vous l'annoncer. Mais je me demandais, pour votre tranquillité d'esprit, si ces enquêtes avaient abouti. Si vous aviez pu écrire vous-même à votre cousine de Portsmouth et la rassurer, ces choses laissées en suspens sont si pesantes. » Frances Eustace était restée parfaitement immobile devant la porte. Puis elle dit, très simplement, « Ce n'était pas nécessaire. Madame Allorand n'avait pas encore écrit la lettre. Je me suis permis de regarder après elle. Il n'y avait pas de lettre. Il n'y avait pas besoin de rassurer qui que ce soit. »« Ah !» dit Miss Marple. « Quelle chance, ma chère. N'est-ce pas ?» Oui, elle inclina la tête et partit. Le ruban noir des roses traîna légèrement lorsqu'elle les souleva de la table. La porte se referma derrière elle avec un clic doux et discret. Miss Marple s'assit. Elle ne souriait pas du tout. Elle pensa, elle vient de me dire qu'elle a fouillé les papiers de Madame Allorand après le meurtre, avant même que la police ait fini de fouiller la maison, avant que quiconque puisse lui en donner la permission. Elle me l'a dit calmement, comme on parle de l'achat d'un nouveau ruban. Et elle m'a aussi dit que la lettre à Portsmouth n'était pas encore écrite. Ce qui signifie qu'elle savait, mardi matin, avant même qu'on trouve la moindre lettre, avant même qu'un cousin ne soit mis au courant, que Madame Halloran n'avait fait que parler. Parler, mais pas encore écrire. Ce qui signifie qu'on le lui avait dit, ou qu'elle avait surpris une conversation. Ce qui signifie, mais la réflexion de Miss Marple fut interrompue à ce moment précis, car le docteur Haydock était arrivé sur le perron, son sac à la main et le visage rayonnant de nouvelles. « Jane, dit-il avant même d'avoir franchi le seuil. Jane, je suis ravi que vous m'ayez fait appeler. Il s'est passé quelque chose d'extraordinaire. Ils ont libéré Garrick. » « Quoi ?» « Ils ont libéré Garrick il y a 1 heure. Slack est furieux. Garrick a finalement un alibi qu'il était trop fier ou trop stupide pour mentionner jusqu'à ce que le greffier du tribunal le lui extorque. Il ne se promenait pas sans but dans le chemin mardi matin. Il était chez Madame Caldicott. Il s'y était rendu pour prendre des nouvelles du garçon, son fils, par l'intermédiaire de la seule personne du village qui leur avait témoigné de la gentillesse à l'époque. Madame Caldicott avait une lettre, voyez-vous, du Yorkshire, et Garrick voulait la voir. Il est resté assis dans son salon de 7h moins le quart à 8h20, à la lire et la relire, tandis que Madame Caldicott lui servait du thé. Elle s'est présentée cet après-midi. Elle était malade, alitée, elle n'a appris son arrestation que ce matin. Dès qu'elle l'a su, elle est allée à Much Benham, qu'il y ait du brouillard ou non, et a tout raconté au magistrat. Miss Marple resta parfaitement immobile. Alors il n'était plus du tout sur le chemin de l'église.
Pas à moins de 400 mètres. De 18h45 à 19h40. Jane, il n'aurait pas pu la tuer. Et le cordon ?
À lui, sans aucun doute. Mais il a disparu depuis la veille au soir. N'importe qui connaissant l'abri à outils aurait pu se servir. Et à St. Mary Mead, tout le monde connaît l'abri à outils. Garrick prête des outils à la paroisse pour la fête chaque année en août. Et le manteau, la déchirure était ancienne. Slack avait trop forcé. Et le garçon à vélo ? J'ai vu un homme en long manteau sombre dans la ruelle. Je n'ai pas vu son visage. J'ai supposé que c'était Garrick parce que Garrick est grand. Garrick dit que le garçon a vu quelqu'un d'autre. Garrick était déjà chez Madame Caldicott à ce moment-là. Un long silence s'ensuivit. « Jane ?» dit le docteur Haydock. Miss Marple releva la tête de ses mains. « J'ai été très très stupide » a-t-elle déclaré. Elle ne voulait pas dire, même si le docteur Haydock l'avait d'abord cru, qu'elle avait été stupide de croire Garrick coupable. Elle voulait dire qu'elle avait été stupide de ne pas voir, dès le début, ce qu'elle était désormais obligée de voir, que le meurtre de Madame Halloran n'était pas celui d'une gouvernante paroissiale, mais celui d'un témoin. Le mobile ne résidait pas dans 11 années de maniérisme et d'opinions non sollicitées, mais dans 3 jours de correspondance encore inachevée. Et la seule personne à St. Mary Mead qui avait demandé à Madame Halloran d'arrêter d'écrire cette lettre était une petite silhouette errante, vêtue de noir de la tête aux pieds, qui avait peut-être déjà causé la mort d'un mari par accident, et qui avait remercié Miss Marple dans cette même pièce, 40 minutes auparavant, pour l'intérêt qu'elle portait à l'affaire. Elle repensa à Nellie Carstairs, Nellie de la pharmacie, Nellie en noir pour un mari que personne n'avait jamais rencontré, Nellie qui avait tué sa tante pour 370 livres, avec une délicatesse infinie, qui avait pleuré si joliment aux funérailles et gardé sa robe de crêpe jusqu'au verdict, avant de la remplacer par une robe grise 6 semaines plus tôt. Nellie n'avait éprouvé aucun remords. Au contraire, un petit sourire secret se dessinait au coin de ses lèvres, le sourire d'une femme qui vient d'apprendre une nouvelle qu'elle attendait. On avait fini par pendre Nellie, non pas sur la base d'un détail médico-légal, mais sur une simple phrase qui lui avait échappé au moment du thé. Elle avait dit, en entendant le sifflement d'une bouilloire, « Voilà, c'est exactement le son qu'elle a fait à la fin. » Et personne ne lui avait dit que sa tante avait émis le moindre son. Miss Marple se versa une autre tasse de thé et sa main était parfaitement stable. « Docteur, dit-elle, j'ai monté cette affaire contre la mauvaise personne. J'aimerais que vous m'aidiez à la monter maintenant contre la bonne. Mais il me faut en être sûr. Il me faut en être absolument certaine. Et pour cela, j'ai besoin de savoir une seule chose, à quelle heure exactement la porte de l'église s'est-elle ouverte et fermée un mardi matin ?» Le docteur Haydock cligna des yeux. Loomis a dit environ 7h15. Oui. Et Madame Halloran, a dit le médecin, est décédée au plus tard à 8h45. Oui. Et le cri que j'ai entendu, dit Miss Marple, a retenti à 7h15 précise. Je venais de regarder mon horloge. L'horloge venait de sonner le quart d'heure. Alors, le cri et la porte de l'église ont claqué au même instant. Madame Halloran a été tuée à 7h15, pas à 7h30, pas à 8h-20. L'homme grand et mince que M. Pettigrew a vu penché sur le corps à 8h-20 n'était pas le meurtrier. C'était un passant qui s'était penché sur une femme déjà morte, qui avait été surpris par le cri de Pettigrew et qui s'était enfui. Le meurtrier était passé. Seigneur, je crois, dit Miss Marple, que je sais maintenant ce que je dois chercher. Et je pense que demain après-midi, je donnerai un petit thé avec du xérès dans cette pièce, aux principaux résidents du presbytère. Et je vous serais très reconnaissante, docteur, si vous pouviez venir également. Et amener l'inspecteur Slack, si l'on peut le persuader d'entrer dans un salon où l'on s'est récemment moqué de lui. Il viendra, Jane. Il viendra, même si je dois le tirer par l'oreille. Bien, dit Miss Marple. Et sur le chemin du retour, pourriez-vous vous arrêter et poser une dernière question à M. Pettigrew? Demandez-lui-ci, lorsque le grand homme maigre au long manteau a quitté le porche en courant, il a couru vers le portillon, comme l'a dit M. Pettigrew, ou s'il s'en est éloigné. Le brouillard, voyez-vous, est si trompeur. Je voudrais en être absolument certaine. Le docteur Haydock la regarda fixement. Pourquoi est-ce important? Parce que, dit Miss Marple, le passage des baisers mène à Marchand, et en s'éloignant du passage des baisers, on arrive au presbytère. Le docteur Haydock partit. Miss Marple resta assise près de son feu jusqu'à ce que la lumière s'éteigne complètement, observant la petite flamme au cœur des braises. Et elle n'était pas, loin de là, une vieille dame à l'aise, et ses mains, pour la première fois de la journée, étaient tout tremblantes. Cette nuit-là, elle rêva d'une bouilloire qui sifflait de Nellie Carstairs en noir, un sourire aux lèvres, et elle se réveilla très tôt et resta allongée à regarder la fenêtre grise se rouvrir lentement. Et elle dit à haute voix, à sa propre surprise, « Elle est entrée. Bien sûr qu'elle est entrée. Elle est entrée par la porte du porche, et elle est sortie par la porte du porche, et c'est tout. »